Good morning, Canada! Welcome back to another episode of Kashmir. Today is December 5th, 2024, and the entire political system, as we know, is absolutely breaking in front of our eyes. I can't stress that enough. You see, today is supposed to be the day where they table a motion of non-confidence, and the Liberals and the NDP are trying to block that. And today is Opposition Leader Day, so Pierre Poilievre has every right to actually table this, and he's almost getting filibustered. This is crazy. It's bananas. It's unprecedented. So what we're taking a look at right now, we're a couple seconds behind because I had to pause it. This is happening in real time, folks. Pierre Poilievre is finally getting the opportunity to table it. So here we go. Buckle up, smash the like button and subscribe. This is likely going to be one of the craziest days in Canadian politics. Here we go. This is bananas, guys.
The honourable member for the honourable leader of the official opposition.
Today in a spirit of non-partisanship, to put our differences aside and take a good idea and a good perspective, no matter where it comes from. You know, too often in this place, we refuse to accept ideas or input from other people. And so I thought I would remedy that by taking the words and the message of the leader of the NDP, putting them in a conservative motion so that all of us could vote for the very wise things that he said. So allow me, in the spirit of this nonpartisan spirit, to read off the motion that we have here. Common sense conservative motion, whereas the leader of the NDP said he has ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government, whereas the NDP leader said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people, whereas the NDP leader said the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power. And he said that in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referral to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters Canada Rail Conference and the ILWU 514 to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. Therefore, the House agrees with the NDP leader, and the House proclaims that it has lost confidence in the Prime Minister and the government.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. It's tabled. The non-confidence.
Thank you. We all applaud the NDP leader. I know that he is enjoying the praise we're giving him. So let's go through point by point, as I know the member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry will take up as I'm splitting my time with him. But let's go through point by point to prove the charge of the NDP leader. He says the Liberals are too weak. Well, he's right about that. The economy is weak. Having lost $500 billion of net investment out to the United States, having shrunk the last 8 quarters in a row on a per capita basis, having seen the productivity per hour worked in Canada drop for 6 quarters in a row. Our economy is now smaller than it was 10 years ago, and we've gone from having median incomes equal to American median incomes to the present, where the American worker makes $22,000 more. Our economy is shrinking in per capita terms. The cost of living is out of reach. We have 2 million people lined up at food banks. We have double the housing costs, the worst housing price inflation in the G7. Vancouver and Toronto are the most expensive housing markets on planet Earth, in all of North America. And so we recognize that economically, the Liberals have made the country weak. And then there's politically weak. Right. This Prime Minister has lost the support not only of Canadians, who overwhelmingly want to fire him, but of his own party. In fact, the Liberal leader in Ontario has said that his carbon tax is wrong. Right. How could she not say that? It will quadruple over the next 5 years. Bringing economic nuclear winter to our country, emptying our shelves of groceries, driving even more people into starvation. Then the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland has said that the Prime Minister's energy cap will kill jobs in that province. And then 20 Liberal MPs want to fire him. But it's also gone to his own cabinet, right in the middle of a potential trade dispute with incoming President Trump. You would assume that the foreign minister of all ministers, if she were to appear in the New York Times would be doing so to fight against the tariffs, but instead, she was in the New York Times with the following headline: New York Times tapped by the Prime Minister to steer foreign affairs. She's now
You see your photo right there?
successor.
Hey, let me show
That
you.
is the foreign minister.
Point of order from the Deputy House Leader.
He's not even remotely good at what he's trying to do. You know he's trying to use a prop, Mr. Speaker. Can
No.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, I'll just remind him to keep that down.
Mr. Speaker, for him to dismiss the foreign minister in that way is outrageous. The reality is she's the one who chose to go to a photo shoot in a studio with the New York Times in an article about how she is the possible successor to her own boss. So you would expect a foreign minister, of all ministers, would be busy fighting tariffs with our biggest trading partner. Instead, she's fighting to replace her boss. On penserait qu'une...
You might think that a Minister of Foreign Affairs would be working hard to prevent tariffs. But instead, she went to the New York Times for a long article which spoke of her as a possible replacement to her leader. That shows weakness.
The leader, the Liberal Prime Minister, is weak. Is he selfish? Well, Mr. Speaker, what else could you call it? When he's treated himself to illegal vacations to private islands, when he's lavished himself with constant gifts and benefits, when he's shut down Parliament numerous times to cover up scandals, while he's refusing to allow Canadians to see to have accountability for the $400 million missing dollars in the Green Slush Fund scandal, and while he protects his own trust fund from the tax increases he imposes on everyone else, one can only think that this is selfish. And while most of all, he stays in power, even seeing the devastating consequences this is having on the lives of everyday Canadians, that is nothing if not selfish. And then we move to the charge that the NDP leader makes that the Prime Minister is attacking the rights of workers. Mr. Speaker, of this there is no doubt. We see the leader of the NDP. He's gone to rallies at places where courageous workers are striking in order to recuperate many of the lost wages that have resulted from government-induced inflation. Exactly. We know we had more strikes last year than in any year since 1983, a 40-year high. We have, of course, Canada Post workers on strike, doing that strike now lasting a long time and doing incredible damage to small business. Hopefully it will come to an end soon, but the NDP leader showed up at these strikes and said, and I quote, "If there is any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, we are going to vote no. I can tell you right now, we'll vote no, whether that vote is a confidence vote or not, whether that vote triggers an election or not. I'm telling the Prime Minister and the Liberals right now, you're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of workers. Never," he said, Mr. Speaker. What a powerful statement. Never, and absolutely categorical. So surely he would vote on this motion, keeping his word to those workers, or was he looking them straight in the eye and telling them a plain falsehood? Will he go back to them after this vote and tell them that when it came down to putting his vote where his words was, he just didn't have the courage, that he was under too much pressure, that the fear of losing an election and facing the voters and facing the music for his own record was too much for him, and therefore he backed down and he turned his back on those workers and left them out in the cold? Is that what he's going to tell those union workers, Mr. Speaker? Right. And if so, how will they ever believe anything he says to them again? Right. The answer is that they, of course, could not. But if the NDP leader does decide to vote against his own words, it will mean two things. One, that he does not want to take responsibility for his own record. He doesn't want voters to have the ability to judge his record and his plans, because he fears that they will render a verdict that is not in his favor. The second thing it will reveal is that in the next election, there are not 5 parties running, there are not 4 parties running, there are 2 parties running. That's right. There is the NDP Bloc Liberal coalition that tax your food, punish your work, double your housing cost, unleash crime and chaos in your community, or common sense conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. That is the choice. That's right. It is a binary choice. You vote for the NDP, you get the Liberals. You vote for the Liberals, you get the NDP. You vote for the Bloc, you get both the NDP and the Liberals. And if you are among the grand majority of Canadians who is unsatisfied with the downward spiral of our country, with the broken borders, broken immigration system, broken economy, if you want to bring home Canada's promise again and restore a country where hard work earns a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food and homes in safe neighborhoods, where anyone from anywhere can do anything in the freest nation on earth, in Canada, then let's bring it home.
Yeah. There it is. There's the dork, Stephen McKinnon, who's going to say something.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Look,
It's official. It's been tabled.
and in other public settings, there's been a member of Parliament, I'll let the leader guess which one, but that member's been here for about 20 years, has a big pension, and I want to give him a couple of quotes and perhaps he could comment on them. One, unions have the power to shut down a workplace. Legal powers give the union a state-enforced monopoly on labor. This member spoke of, quote, fattened union contracts. Wow. This member allowed right-to-work legislation, that's optional union membership, in his party's platform. And that member cannot, quote, comprehend that union firms can be competitive with non-union ones. I wonder if that member of Parliament could explain those comments that he's made about working people in this country.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the member can distort my record instead of defending his own. He is the part of the government, this former corporate lobbyist and party staffer who spent his time making money off the political system, can explain why he and his government have presided over the largest number of strikes in the last 40 years of Canadian history. Never have there been more strikes than since 1983, and they have consistently, Liberals, with the help of the NDP, have overpowered the rights of workers to carry out those strikes and used their legal authority to rob workers of their autonomy and their independent decision-making, Mr. Speaker. That is their record. And by the way, it is the first time in our history that people with good union jobs cannot afford homes. It is the first time in history that en masse union workers are lined up at food banks. Mr. Speaker, that is the tragic record of this broken government. That's why we need a common sense conservative government will bring home the country we knew and loved.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable député de Jonquière.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, I won't try to hide the fact that sometimes I struggle to follow the leader of the official opposition.
Because you're slow?
He often has said that teachers were stepping down because there was no more heating in schools, or that nurses were leaving their jobs because of a lack of heating in their hospitals. But he's never proposed any solutions. And thinking back to what he said not long ago, he said that electricians can seize lightning in their hands and use that to wire a house. Wouldn't they be able to use these extraordinary skills to heat hospitals and schools then? The honourable leader of the opposition. Yes, electricians would be capable of providing heating in schools and in hospitals. And electricians do have exceptional skills thanks to their experience and other good qualities, and I admire that, which is why I use this poetic metaphor to describe people working in the skilled trades. And I think the fact that I use this poetic language shows once again that the Conservative Party loves the arts, and I would be happy to use further poetic language to help the Bloc Québécois understand common sense and to understand our solutions, which includes axing the taxes that force provinces to fire nurses and teachers in order to be able to pay the heating bills. We will axe those taxes and we will support nurses and teachers.
And comments, the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Hamilton Centre, Mr.
Sorry, Hamilton.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member from the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Conservative Party would be laughable if his hypocrisy wasn't so ridiculous. He stood up right now in his opening remarks and exposed himself. This man has never been to a picket line. He called it a rally for striking workers. This leader fought aggressively against card check legislation. He was one of the loudest supporters of the anti-union Bill C-377. He also is proudly one of the loudest proponents of the U.S. right-to-work legislation. So my question is simple. Despite all of his cosplay, we've seen he can't even put on a high-vis vest, has this member ever once in his life actually visited a picket line?
Bro, what does that have to do with anything?
To answer.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.
Yeah, put some W's down for Pierre. Come on. Has he ever visited a picket line?
Reprise.
He has.
The Honourable Member for Stormont, Dundas,
What an idiot.
Glengarry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's always an honour and a tough act to follow when the Leader of the Opposition and Canada's next Prime Minister.
Order. So it was just getting a little noisy there. I wasn't hearing what's going on. We have a point of order from the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to listen to my
Shut up, nerd.
colleague. He's trying to give a speech, but his own colleagues are heckling him. Could you ask them to stop so that I could please hear the honourable member?
Thank you.
He sounds
I beat you to it. I
pathetic.
apologize for beating you to that was getting a little too noisy in the chamber. So I want to make sure that the Honourable Member for Starmount, Dundas, South Glengarry has the full...
Please, Mr. Speaker. Please do something. We're getting destroyed. Please.
Until I see I have the full attention of the House, I'm just going to stand here and wait.
I need my safe space.
The Honourable Member for Stormount, Dundas, South Glengarry.
It is always an honour and a tough act to follow the Leader of the Opposition and Canada's next Prime Minister. And sorry for the noise on this side of the House, but we are fired up for a carbon tax election that the NDP have the opportunity to do today. We are going to have on the floor here now debating and calling the NDP out. The Leader of the NDP is so mad he's had enough here. Let's listen and let's just recall again what he said just the past few months alone. He said that he had ripped up his coalition agreement with the Liberals. He said he was fed up. He said, quote, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interest to fight for people. And he also said, to continue again, quote, the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power. And that was in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referral to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters, Canada Rail Conference, and ILW 514 to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. The NDP leader talks a tough game. Out at press conferences, on Twitter, on X, on Facebook, social media. He goes in question period and pretends to be outraged. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to test that outrage. If he's truly had enough, it is time to vote non-confidence. And we are saying, therefore, the House simply agrees. Conservatives simply agree with the NDP leader. We are fed up with this Prime Minister. We are fed up with this NDP Liberal government. Enough is enough. Back your words up with action and vote to have non-confidence in this government. It's time for a carbon tax election. The question is, will the NDP finally do that? I have a feeling, though, from what we've heard the last couple of days, Mr. Speaker, is the NDP won't do that. Because they claim all the wonderful things that they're getting done for Canadians. They just need more time. They need more runway to prop the Liberals up. The coalition agreement was not ripped up. After that little stunt and photo op, he taped it back together piece by piece and handed it right back to the Prime Minister. The sellout leader of the NDP has done it again. Time and time again, even this week when we put the NDP's own words into emotion, all that tough talk, they're sitting and going to prop the Prime Minister up again. And that, let's make it very clear, Mr. Speaker, it is not because the NDP are getting things done for Canadians. It is because the record of what they have done, the true record, the record that Canadians know, that they are just as complicit with the miserable last few years that millions of Canadians have faced. Let's think about it. 2 million visits to food banks in Canada now per month in this country. The Feed Ontario report came out, 1 million Ontarians are using a food bank now in this country. We know that the Daily Bread Food Bank in Toronto says 10%, 1 in every 10 Torontonians are using a food bank. And for the NDP to sit here and say they support workers and they have their back, they have sent, under their record, under their doubling of housing, rising food inflation faster than we've seen in decades, a carbon tax that goes up and up and up and is going to be quadrupled still yet. All these stats, and we're seeing workers hurting more than ever before in my lifetime and in beyond. 18% of food bank users now are workers, saying employment, they are working, but they can't afford to make ends meet. Workers can't afford their mortgages or their rent that have doubled under the watch of the NDP Liberals. Look at crime. The increasing gun violence, a over 100% increase in gun and gang violence in this country. Auto theft through the roof under their watch after 9 years. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, when you look at every part of their record, it's not delivering for people, it's hurting for people. And that's why the hypocrisy of what the NDP are doing here, they're putting their own words into action. If they're so outraged at how bad this Prime Minister is, all the things that are happening in this country, if they are upset on their rights of labor and unionized workers to be able to strike, if they truly meant what they said outside this chamber, if they truly meant what they said during question period and debates, when the question gets called and we have to stand, they should easily say what millions of Canadians want them to finally say. They do not have confidence in this Prime Minister. Vote non-confidence and have a carbon tax election. But they won't. And here's the thing, in a carbon tax election, let's just think about the NDP and where they're at. I think I've lost track of the numbers. I think it's 28 was the last time I heard the number of times the NDP voted with the Liberals to prop them up in confidence votes and budgets and estimates and everything else in between. And every single time that plan supported the carbon tax and supported their plan together, along with the Bloc Québécois, to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Well, funny, around the end of summer, a by-election comes in an NDP riding in Winnipeg. All of a sudden, I think the NDP leader was hearing it at the doors with his candidate about just how unpopular the NDP has become by propping this Prime Minister up and by quadrupling the carbon tax. He came out and said the NDP no longer support the carbon tax and they support something else. Didn't say what that was. The by-election's over. They eked through. Their margin shrunk drastically. And no sooner did the NDP leader flip-flop on the carbon tax, he flip-flopped on his flip-flop now, and he's voting again with the Prime Minister and the Liberals to prop them up, prop the carbon tax up, and prop up the quadrupling of the carbon tax. It's like political wilderness the NDP's in right now. They say they don't support the carbon tax after they did support the carbon tax, and now they're back to supporting it by propping the Liberals up, but they won't say what their plan is instead. It's like being in the political wilderness, and the only time they come out of the forest is to vote to prop the Liberals up, and they run back in again. That is exactly what they have been doing for years. And guess what? The reason they don't want to have an election is they know that they're on the wrong side of Canadians. Because there are two choices. There's not 5 or 6 different options in the next election, there's going to be two. Because it's the Liberals, it's the NDP, it's the Bloc, and it's the Green Party that think the carbon tax is doing wonders. It's when you tax the farmer that grows the food, you tax the trucker that ships the food, you tax the stores that sell the food with the carbon tax. Nothing contributes to inflation. It all is just made up in Canadians' heads. Canadians know better, and that's why they are desperately, desperately avoiding a carbon tax election. It is the leader's record of the NDP on Labour that is absolutely hypocritical. We go time and time again. He said, I want to read a quote just from about 1 month ago. He said, quote, if there is ever any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, speaking to union members on November the 12th last month, we're going to vote no. I can tell you right now we'll vote no. Whether that vote is a confidence vote or not, whether that triggers an election or not, I'm telling the Prime Minister and the Liberals right now, you're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of workers. Never. He said that last month. Our motion calls that out today. It is not a game to vote for non-confidence and to have an election and to say enough of this, Prime Minister. What is political games is voting against this, the NDP voting against their own words and they're not matching their actions with the rhetoric they've said for the last while. But Mr. Speaker, I want to wrap up today and I want to say to Canadians, my part of Eastern Ontario across this country, things are not good right now. The numbers and the stats we are showing are difficult to hear. We have to spend a lot of time talking about doubling of housing, food inflation, food bank use, drug overdose deaths. But Mr. Speaker, I want to provide a message of hope. It was not this bad before the NDP and Liberals came in, and it will not be that bad after we give them the boot. I'm thinking today in this motion, it's not just about the NDP. It's about the 30-something-year-old that's stuck in their parents' basement. We're going to build new homes by axing the GST on new home sales under $1 million. For the 47,000 Canadians that have lost their life to drug overdoses, Mr. Speaker, treatment and recovery, not the legalization of hard drugs. We're going to give a country that we knew, restore the Canada we know and love, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the NDP to get with the program, call an election, back up their words. Let's have Canadians finally have their say.
Questions and comments? Monsieur commentaire,
Man,
Deputy House Leader.
Pierre and his crew are good.
When the Leader of the Opposition was speaking moments ago, he said Liberals, with the help of the NDP, have overpowered the rights of workers. Can the member explain what he meant by that?
Member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
It is right exactly, Mr. Speaker, in the motion. The NDP is calling out the Liberal failure, the Liberal Minister of Labour, for what he has done when it comes to not respecting the right of union workers to strike. It is that minister and that Liberal government that's answered the question that took away their right to collective bargaining. They talk a big game and their actions speak completely different. It's time now for the NDP. If they're going to call the Liberals out and say how bad it is time to respect union workers. It's time to respect the collective bargaining process. It's time for the NDP to back their words up with action. The tough rhetoric out of the microphone and in question period, it's time to do that when it comes to a vote and it comes to a carbon tax election.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Speaker, as a new member of Parliament, I wasn't part of the Confidence and Supply Agreement, but I don't want to be a part of a government that doesn't support workers in this country. I walked the picket lines many times in my life, specifically with the workers of Teamsters.
I've got a walking joke.
My dad fight for the rights of brothers and sisters. I have listened to my brother talk about the safety issues his co-workers are facing every day on the job. I don't support the back to work legislation that this level government forced. But what will the Conservatives do to support workers in this country? And I don't mean in words, I mean in action.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
Well, I want to welcome that new member to the chamber. And remember, it was her during that by-election campaign alongside her leader that said they no longer supported the carbon tax. What are we doing to support workers in this country? Going to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Union workers in this country are using food banks at a record level. They are living in their parents' basement because they can't afford a new home at a time we need to build more homes. We're building less. And here's the thing about the NDP again. Oh, we don't support the government. She wasn't here when the Supply and Confidence Agreement was written. But guess what? She's going to be voting on this motion. If she is so upset about all the things that she just mentioned, take it to Canadians. Make the pitch. Make the case. The NDP won't do that because they know that Canadians are going to give them the boot, not a reward.
Questions and comments? Monsieur Commentaire, the honourable member for Battle River.
I love Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the speech that my colleague from Ontario just gave. And when it comes
he's in
to,
jeans. I like that.
Out the leader of the fourth party in this place, the leader of the NDP, it truly is one of these examples where the talk comes to action. So I'm wondering if my colleague from Ontario could expand a little bit on how the vote that will take place in just a few days is an opportunity for the fourth party to decide whether or not they're all talk or whether or not they're willing to take action and actually put these ideas to the test before Canadians.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
I appreciate my colleague's reminder to Canadians of the question that the NDP is going to be voting on. We are putting their own words. I didn't make anything up. I'm not putting even my words. It's not even a Conservative words in the Opposition Day motion. We are being nonpartisan and letting the NDP finally let that stress relief out. If they have ripped up their supply and confidence coalition agreement, if the Liberals are too weak and too selfish and too beholden, and if the Liberal governments always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure unions have no power, they should support their own words. Let Canadians say in an election, it's that simple. What are they scared of?
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech.
If you guys haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you to smash the like button and subscribe.
Confused today.
Helps grow the channel, helps push the live stream out further. This is one heck of a day already, and we're just getting started.
For electoralist reasons, the NDP ripped up its agreement. They said they no longer had confidence in the government, but continued to support the government. On the other hand, the Conservatives for a long time have been saying that they no longer have confidence in the government. We've been clear about it. We had our 2 opposition days for seniors and also for supply management, and the Conservatives said they would support us on that one at some point. But the Conservatives have been making everything stall in this House, so we've not been able to table a non-confidence motion. So can we finally have an election?
Dundas, okay.
The Bloc Liberal coalition with the NDP is alive and well. She's saying the House has been paralyzed by anything but the Liberals holding back on $400 million green slush fund documents to go to the RCMP. If the Bloc, they try to negotiate with the Liberals, got nowhere, it's their credibility that's shot, no one else's.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be splitting my time. Perhaps the member for King's Hants will even be nice enough to finish my speech, mais je suis honoré de prendre la parole aujourd'hui.
I'm honored to rise today to discuss our government's strong commitment to equity and equality for Canadian workers. But the Conservative leader is very hypocritical, and he wants to put an end to the union movement in Canada. The member for Carleton tried to wax poetic, talking about workers today, but it's not true. The only workers' right he supports is the right that Canadians have to work for less. I'm honored to be able to talk about the progress that we've made to help Canadian workers and their families have a more fair future.
He now uses them as unwilling props in his latest parliamentary temper tantrum.
Unreal.
Let me tell you what the member for Carleton proudly supported. 2 anti-union bills, C-377 and C-525, which sought to make it harder for workers to organize and undermine the ability of unions to fight for their members. We repealed those bills, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
The Conservative Party policy declaration, today, as it exists, page 6, states that the Conservative Party of Canada supports right-to-work legislation to allow optional union membership, unquote. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, Liberals have been there for workers from day one. On this side of the House, we stand on our record, not empty slogans.
Hear, hear.
So we've made sure that federally regulated employees have had access to up to 10 paid sick days per year. That helps nearly 1 million Canadians. A growing share of Canada's workforce is now comprised of gig workers. Gig work can offer many benefits, such as flexibility and more freedom at work. However, these kinds of work arrangements can also deprive workers of the rights, protections, and entitlements they deserve. So on June 20th, 2024, we brought legislation into force to better protect gig workers in federally regulated industries against misclassification. Last year, we announced 5 new clean tech tax credits, We're investing $93 billion over the next decade in tax credits for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, clean technology adoption, clean technology manufacturing, clean hydrogen, clean electricity, and EV supply chains. But, Mr. Speaker, to get the full extent and benefit of 4 of those 5 tax credits, companies have to hire union workers or pay workers a prevailing union wage and create apprenticeships. Mr. Speaker, after question period and after the votes today, we'll have the opportunity, me or my colleague from King's Hands, to go into deep detail about the positive, progressive record of this government for unions and for workers. We won't be talking about things like the Conservative leader talks about, that union contracts that pay workers a decent wage result in, quote, pointless, quote, unnecessary inflation of costs, that non-union firms with lower wages are good for competition. We won't be talking about those things. The Conservative leader is pretending. It's fake, Mr. Speaker, and we'll have more to say later. Thank you very much.
Oh.
The Honourable Minister will have 6 minutes.
He's smiling about it right after, and they're shaking his hand. Well done.
My members,
it really made me feel safe.
The Honourable Member
from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will mark 35 years since the murder of 14 women in an engineering class at Polytechnique Montréal simply because they were women. I wish I could say that this misogynistic violence was an outlier, yet this year alone, 168 women and girls across the country have already been killed in femicides. In the face of this gender-based violent epidemic, the frontline work being done by organizations including those in my community like Women's Crisis Services, the Sexual Assault Support Center of Waterloo Region, the Coalition of Muslim Women, and YWKW are all the more important. My sincere thanks to them. For those in Waterloo Region looking to come together for the National Day of Remembrance and Action Against Gender-Based Violence, to remember the victims of the Polytechnique Massacre and all those we've lost since, CFUW will be hosting a vigil at 5:30 tomorrow night at St. Columba Anglican Church. I hope to see you there.
The Honourable Member from Richmond Centre, for Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, since elected, I've been working with my colleague from Steveston, Richmond East, to address our housing priority in the City of Richmond. As a result, early this January, our Liberal government invested $35.9 million through the Housing Accelerator Fund for Richmond to build more homes faster. This important.
So we got a little bit of a boring back and forth right now, folks.
166 new.
Because I'm going to mute him for a second there. Because I had to pause it when I went live. I skipped. We skipped out on maybe 30 seconds, 20 seconds of it being live. So now we're live. So they're going to be doing their statements by members for the next 15 or 10 minutes. And then we're getting into question period. All right. And it's going to be absolutely insane. It's all going to be focused around Jagmeet Singh's own words being used against him in the motion that Pierre Poilievre just tabled. So you're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be incredible. There's going to be lots of zingers. So use this time now to stretch your legs, get yourself a coffee, get yourself a beverage, get yourself settled in. Make sure to like the stream. Let's see if we can get over 1,000 likes before question period starts. I don't think that's too much to ask for. And here we go, folks.
Joy and magic in Orleans. Every year, he has brought a twinkle to the eyes of the young and the old alike and offered the community a unique moment of togetherness and celebration, with record crowds of 150,000 people lining St. Joseph's Boulevard. Organising a parade with 75 floats for nearly 3 decades is no easy task, but he accomplished it with brio and determination. Although the 30th of November was his last parade, Robert created much more than just an event. A tradition that year after year helps to make Orleans shine. Thank you so much for these 27 years, Robert. The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, in 2024, the Boucherville Rowing Club celebrates its 50th year. Since it was founded in 1974, the club has been able to take advantage of Boucherville's exceptional geographical location facing the majestic St. Lawrence River. Over the years, Many of its athletes have been selected for our national teams, and some have even made it to the Olympics.
And the debate for the non-confidence will also continue after question period.
Such as mutual aid, team.
So you're not going to want to just watch QP and then dip out. You're going to want to see the debate. There's going to be a vote on gender equality or some weird thing like that. And then the debate should continue. All right, so this is going to be a good long stream. Buckle in. Okay?
And its head coach, Christian Hardy Cardinal.
It's going to be a good day.
Thank you to
It's going to be a good day, folks.
Who has been involved in this organization over the past half-century of adventures. It's clear that you're all rowing together towards excellence.
The honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I received a message from a small business owner in our community. He said, quote, "Thank you, MP Shafkat Ali and Liberal leadership. Our small business received Canada Carbon Rebate today. It came in unexpectedly and at the right time." End quote. Great to see that Canada Carbon Rebate for small and medium-sized businesses is making a real difference. $2.5 billion of the proceeds from the price on pollution is going back to about 600,000 small businesses. Our government is committed to making life more affordable for Canadians while protecting our environment and helping small and medium-sized businesses to grow, innovate, and stay competitive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Alberta is the beating heart of Canada. It's where farmers, truckers, and energy workers rise before the sun, roll up their sleeves, and build this country's prosperity. It's where hard work, freedom, and community aren't just values, they're a way of life. But the NDP Liberal
Did you guys hear that there's a 7.0 earthquake off the west coast?
Carbon tax.
There's going to be a tsunami.
Choose between
tsunami warning.
They're capping oil and gas, killing
California,
the jobs that built this country,
and Oregon.
leaving towns struggling to survive. They don't respect Alberta, its people, or what we stand for. But Mr. Speaker, Albertans don't quit. We don't break, we work harder, stand taller, and keep moving forward. The solution is clear. A common-sense Conservative government that will axe the carbon tax, scrap the cap, and restore hope and prosperity to Alberta. Together, we'll bring home the Canada we know and love. Strong, proud, and free.
Hear, 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 hear. The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to celebrate an incredible milestone for a small but mighty voice in Dartmouth, the North Dartmouth Echo. 20 years ago, this non-profit newspaper was born out of a single but powerful vision to amplify the good news in the community, news that too often went unheard. Since then, the Echo has become a beacon of positivity, staffed entirely by dedicated volunteers, now an all-woman team, who publish 5 inspiring issues a year. This is more than a newspaper, Mr. Speaker, it's the heartbeat of a community. The Echo shares the triumphs of local schools, small businesses, non-profits, and everyday residents. It connects, celebrates, and uplifts North Dartmouth. I want to give a quick recognition to Sylvia Anthony, a co-founder whose tireless efforts, selling ads, gathering stories, and even delivering the newspaper herself keep this incredible initiative alive. As the Echo publishes its December issue, let's all celebrate this 20-year legacy of community spirit and good news. Here's to another 20 years of making North Dartmouth proud. Hear, hear, hear.
The honourable member for Outremont. 35 years since the massacre at the École Polytechnique, like every year, I will be joining my community on Mount Royal to commemorate and pay tribute to the 14 women whose lives were stolen simply because they were women. The advocacy of survivors like Nathalie Provost and the members of Poilievre.
Reminder to smash the like button, folks.
Encourage us to strengthen.
Smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already.
And especially on a day like today, I would like to thank them, Poilievre, in this house, for their courage.
To fighting gun violence. We've taken historic steps to ban assault weapons like the one used in the femicide at Poilievre, and we are working tirelessly to curb the scourge of gender-based violence. 14 young women were taken from us 35 years ago. We will never forget them. We owe it to them and to all victims of gun violence to continue this fight.
The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, Canada now has the dubious distinction of having a violent crime rate even higher than the United States. Just yesterday, 2 people were wounded in a stabbing attack in Vancouver. It's like Canadians have become numb to these stories. It's like they almost expect them day to day. Liberals have presided over a 92% increase in gang-related murders since they took office. Child sexual abuse and exploitation material offences are up 52% since just last year. And police chiefs are calling out the Prime Minister for allowing extremely violent repeat offenders out on bail. But it's not just about the numbers, Mr. Speaker. On the side of each crime statistic is a victim whose life has been changed forever. These people usually remain nameless, voiceless, and faceless. This is the Prime Minister's track record. This is why we need an election now. And I can promise this. Unlike the Prime Minister, a Conservative government will fight for the nameless, voiceless, and faceless.
Well done.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, inflation is cooling and interest rates are dropping, but not all Canadians are feeling the relief quite yet. So that's why our government is putting a little bit more money back into the pockets of Canadians to help them afford the things they need and save up for the things that they want. The vote passed last week, and that means this season Canadians will not pay GST on things that are holiday essentials for many of us, like prepared meals, kids' clothes, and Christmas trees. Oddly, though, one member in this House did not want to give Canadians a tax break this holiday. The leader of the opposition. The same guy who loves to talk about axing taxes and who even ran
60 days is
holiday in the
not a tax break. It's a
This is the
temporary halt.
giving and caring, Speaker. Maybe the opposition leader's heart is just 2 sizes too small.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
The opposition leader has offered the finance minister 2 hours to present the fall economic statement on Monday. The minister's response was to reject the offer to provide an update that would take no more than a minute. It's absurd that Canadians are in the dark about how dire the fiscal situation is in this country. The NDP Liberal Costly Coalition has created inflationary deficits that are hurting Canadians at the grocery store, the gas pumps, and in their monthly heating bills. Canadians are trying to manage household budgets while this government's inflationary deficits are costing every Canadian as the deficits blow up uncontrollably. Canadians were promised a $40 billion deficit cap in the spring budget. So what is the real deficit number, and why won't the finance minister take up the offer by the opposition leader to tell Canadians the truth in the People's House? By hiding the truth, the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister are proving once again that they cannot be redeemed at this point, and they must be replaced by a common-sense Conservative government who will fix the budget. Mr. Speaker, a carbon tax election can't come soon enough.
Agreed.
The honourable member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government can be summed up by 2 principles: pensions and power. The leader of the NDP will continue to vote pro-confidence in this government so he can receive his pension. It's the perfect partnership. The Prime Minister gets the power and the NDP get their pensions. More hypocrisy from the Maserati Marxist, champagne socialist, jet-setting, high-carbon coalition that has broken our economy, doubled our housing costs, and crippled our natural resource, agriculture, and transport sectors. They brought in back-breaking regulations and taxations that have led to record numbers at our food banks and sky-high violent crime. The NDP do their grandiose announcements about breaking up with their Liberal partners, but when push comes to shove, They continue to prop up the very government that has gotten us into the mess. When will the leader of the NDP finally stop the talk, take some action, and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide between the carbon tax coalition and a common sense conservative government that will axe the tax, stop the crime, fix the budget?
Oh, he's red in the face. Put some W's down for him, huh?
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Order. Order, please. I know that colleagues would like to listen to all members' declarations. I'll ask them, please, to not take the floor. The Honourable Member for Halifax West.
Thank you. Silent night, holiday bright. Mr. Speaker, we did what's right. With inflation still hard to bear, we voted for real relief to show we care. GST, HST off essential needs, we're helping families to succeed. Silent night, not all is right. The leader of the opposition refused this light. The leader who vowed to axe the tax turned his back when time to act. Broken promises Canadians see, a leader that's harmony. Silent night, the question is clear.
You suck with this.
Deny hope this time of year. Canadians deserve to know why tax relief was met with no.
Whose grandma is this? Come get your grandma.
From my family to yours, may joy and cheer bring warmth and peace for the year. Thank you.
Yay. Somebody come get their grandma. She's lost.
The Honourable Member for Order. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, after months of investigation, data gathering, testimony and...
He's got vampire teeth.
Amnesty International has come to the conclusion that genocide is taking place against Palestinians in Gaza. After bombardments against civilian populations that have left more than 52,000 dead, more than 100,000 wounded, 2 million displaced in an area from which they cannot flee, and a humanitarian crisis in which hunger is being used as a weapon of war, this conclusion will come as no surprise to anyone. At least no one with an iota of compassion. Knowing this, Canada is violating only...
Audrey with the two saying, what are we listening to? Chat GPT content?
Despite its promises, the Liberal government continues to authorize arms sales to the Netanyahu regime.
Chat GST content, bro. No GST tax for 60 days.
For our very eyes. That is the reason for which the Liberal government must sanction the Netanyahu regime, stop arms sales, and officially recognize the Palestinian state.
Who fucking cares?
L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Christmas is just around the corner, as we've seen today. Not because we're buried by a beautiful sheet of snow, but because it's a traditional Grande Guignolée des Médias. To launch this 24th edition, volunteers will be collecting funds today at more than 400 collection points across Quebec, including Trois-Rivières. Under the theme, Hunger Comes So Quickly, this year's Grande Guignolée, so food drive, aims to highlight just how close we sometimes are to food insecurity. Job loss, separations, accidents, or illnesses, no one is immune. And since no one is immune, let us all show solidarity and compassion as the festive season approaches. All month long until December 31st, Quebecers can continue to offer donations and foodstuffs. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I encourage everyone to contribute generously to the Grande Guignolée des Médias. Generosity warms the heart, even when it's buried under 6 foot of snow.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage.
You got one job, dude.
Speaker, 1 in 4 skipping meals, 2 million at food banks. A new report confirms families will have to spend an extra $800 for food thanks to the NDP Liberal carbon tax. And what does the NDP leader do? He sells out Canadians to secure his $2.2 million pension. He's refusing to vote non-confidence in a motion based on his own words. He stated the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Yet here he is once again putting on a show. This sellout leader has voted for the carbon tax 24 times. With friends like the Maserati Marxist, it's no wonder this Prime Minister keeps him around. He doesn't care about workers. He doesn't care about paychecks. He doesn't care about you. End this costly coalition. Put Canadians first and call a carbon tax election.
Call a Maserati election. Hey, put a sunshine down in the chat if you want me to be a House Speaker one day.
Mr. Speaker, this week we have learned more about the alleged reports of foreign interference in the Conservative leadership race. All parties,
Let's see how many people want it.
NDP and the Green Party, have taken the government up on its offer to get a security clearance. Yet the leader of Conservative Party still refuses to get this security clearance and to access classified documents that would help him protect the party and Canadian from foreign interference. This is not real leadership. Canadians are wondering what the Conservative Party leader has to hide. If he had nothing to hide, he would get the clearance, take the briefing, and protect the country.
Oral questions.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, soon to be next Prime Minister of Canada.
Today, weak men create hard times, and this week,
or not,
Minister's inflationary deficits gave Canadians the worst standard of living in over 40 years. The finance minister promised one of her fiscal guardrails would not be going over her deficit, which is $40 billion. In fact, the PBO said she blew right past it. Simple question, what's the deficit?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what my honourable colleague fails to point out is that Canada is projected to have the fastest growing economy in the G7 next year. He fails to point out that we are creating jobs at a near record pace. He doesn't understand that wages are increasing faster than inflation. His strategy for the economy is to make cuts to the programs that are supporting people, cuts to the programs that are building houses. He's opposing, ironically, the tax cut that would deliver relief to families over the holidays. We're going to focus on growing the economy in a way that works for everyone, not the Conservative approach to cut the supports that families need.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
He could have just said he doesn't know, like he doesn't know where the million people he lost went. And even this number-challenged Prime Minister admits every new dollar of his handouts make his inflationary deficits worse. He says he's going to leave the economy to the bankers, that he doesn't think about monetary policy, and he said budgets balance themselves. It's the same incompetence that made Canadians bank broke, building broke, and belly broke. Canadians want to know how broken the Liberal deficit is. What's the number?
Way to go, Jack!
That's all we want to know.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
My honourable colleague seems to have a penchant for alliteration and personal insults, but what he lacks is an ability to advance policies that will grow the economy or actually help people in need. Mr. Speaker, at every opportunity, they oppose the investments that are creating jobs in this country. They oppose the investments that are building homes in this country, and they oppose the measures that are going to provide tax cuts to middle-class families, to low-income families, to workers in this country. For once, I wish we could have a debate about the issues instead of stooping to these lows where they throw insults instead of advancing policies that help real people.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Here's a common sense policy that common sense Conservatives will bring in when his constituents fire him after the next election. We're going to axe the tax for good for everyone. And these deficits that this Prime Minister keeps making sent over 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month, made 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals, and sent 1 in 5 kids into poverty. But the Finance Minister said all of them are just feeling a vibe session. Look, if she's not going to release her economic statement, will she at least tell Canadians how bad she's going to blow through her deficit?
Yeah, way to go, Jack!
Give us some numbers.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
I'd like to remind that member that the last time that Conservatives were in government,
More than 16% of kids were living in poverty, over 1 million children. Since we've come into government, Mr. Speaker, we've lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty through measures like the Canada Child Benefit, supporting families each and every month with up to over $700, through the National School Food Program, now in place in 4 provinces across this country, helping to ensure kids have food at school. Not to mention an HST GST tax break, Mr. Speaker. We're there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister supported by the Bloc Québécois, this Liberal government is so bad that it's ashamed of its own results. In the last budget, the Minister of Finance predicted a $40 billion deficit, but now we know that the government has added at least $6 billion in inflationary spending to that forecast. But the Prime Minister is ashamed to reveal what the state of the public coffers is. When will the Prime Minister accept our offer to be transparent with Canadians and present the fall economic statement on Monday? Why are they so afraid of letting Canadians know the truth?
Well, that's the golden question, right?
Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Well, speaking of telling Canadians the truth, Mr. Speaker, when we offered a tax break to Canadians over the holidays, a proposal that the leader of the Conservative Party supported a mere 2 years ago, then what did the leader of the official opposition do? He told his MPs to vote against it, regardless of what they actually wanted. Here in Ottawa today, Conservative members are no longer the representatives of their constituents here in Ottawa. On the contrary, they carry the will of their leader back into their ridings. It's inexcusable. If they really are serious about helping Canadians, they will vote for the tax break. I would invite the Honourable Member for Port-Neuf, Jacques Cartier, to not take the floor, if not allowed by this chair. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, this member ought to be ashamed. The Prime Minister, with the support of the Bloc, keeps spending unaccountably, or without accountability, rather. Meanwhile, families are paying a price for this. According to a Sylvain Charlebois report on food prices, families will have to pay up to $800 more for the groceries in 2025. The Prime Minister thinks that budgets will balance themselves, but he has also said that deficits lead to inflation. He promised to limit the deficit to $40 billion. So will next week's economic statement confirm that he will keep that commitment, or will he cause even more inflation for families? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, my colleague just quoted Sylvain Charlebois on food prices. That same person has said that climate change is the biggest challenge for the agri-food sector. In fact, he just published a report on the impact, the macroeconomic impacts of all this on the agricultural sector. And on page 14, the first part of the report is on climate change. Does it mention the carbon price? No, not at all. That's not even a factor, according to Professor Charlebois. None of this makes any sense. I would just remind the minister to not use documents like this as props. You can quote things, but you can't visibly reference a document. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Well, Mr. Speaker, this will come as a shock to no one, but the Senate is still dragging its feet on Bill C-282 for protecting supply management. For 18 months, our so-called wise men and women in the upper chamber have been looking at this bill, which has a single clause. They've spent 18 months studying a single clause. Wow. And yet today they are still postponing a vote on a crucial amendment. They're trying to push it until after the holidays. Will all of the party leaders ask the senators to stop dragging their feet, to have a vote, and to ensure that C-282 is carried before Christmas? The Honourable Government House Leader. As my colleague knows very well, we on this side of the House, we support this bill. The Prime Minister, all of our ministers and caucus have spoken with the senators and are suggesting that they do that work. In fact, the only party leader in this House that we don't know where he stands is the Conservative leader, because we know his caucus is divided on the issue of supply management. But I can assure my honourable colleague that this government fully support supply management. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Things are not moving quickly enough, Mr. Speaker. It's been 18 months. The senators have still not managed to study a bill with a single clause. It can only mean one of two things. Either they're ready to retire or they're thumbing their nose at us once again. And when I say that, I'm not just speaking of the MPs here in this House. I'm also speaking of all the farmers in Quebec and Canada who are under the supply managed system. That's 90,000 jobs just in Quebec. These people deserve to get an answer before Christmas. On behalf of our farmers, will all the parties ask the senators to get moving before the holidays? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my honourable colleague in the Bloc Québécois, we agree. This is important for farmers. This is important for the supply managed sectors in Quebec and elsewhere in the country. We agree with that bill. We support what the Bloc has done. We support the bill getting through the Senate. Only the Conservatives seem to have issues with this. So I would invite my honourable member for the Bloc Québécois.
Look at the devious Mark Miller in the background.
Stop blocking this bill.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. L'honorable député de New Westminster, Burnaby.
Les gens en arrachent avec.
Mr. Speaker, people are struggling with the cost of living throughout the country, and a new report shows that a 4-person family will pay $800 additional for groceries in 2025. Meanwhile, big grocery chain CEOs are raking in the profits, but the Conservatives don't care at all about the working class. They always want to help their billionaire buddies. Meanwhile, the Liberals could change things if they wanted to. Will they finally stand up against the greed of the big grocery chains? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his excellent question. The NDP has an opportunity to help people during the holidays.
He looks weird with those glasses,
this tax break. We're asking the NDP to work with us to help Canadians so that millions of people will get a tax break over the holidays. They have an opportunity to do that, and I'm asking them to help.
Honourable member from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Translation, they won't. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are feeling squeezed. A new report says a family of 4 can expect to pay $800 more in food in 2025. While grocery CEOs are getting richer, workers are scrambling to put food on the table. Liberals let people down. And the Conservatives, they want tax breaks for CEOs, leaving Canadians paying more for everything. Billionaires don't need relief. The working class does. Will the Liberals permanently remove the GST off of life essentials so that families can get a break?
Hear, 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 hear. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
We know that life is expensive, Mr. Speaker, and we want to deliver a break to Canadians. We know that the cost of food has gone too high, which is why we want to remove tax over the holidays. The irony is the Conservatives make the same attack, but they are opposing a tax cut on food for families. Right. Mr. Speaker, I should plan as well the idea that we've got an important stakeholder in Ottawa advocating for a national school food program this week. Her name is Molly. She is an 8-year-old in grade 3 at A.G. Bailey in Nova Scotia, and we're going to provide not only a tax cut on food, but a national school food program so she and her classmates will be able to enjoy a healthy meal every day of the year.
Order. The Honourable Member for Foothills.
The NDP Liberal Carbon Tax Coalition is delivering Canadians a Christmas nightmare. Canada's Food Price Index report showed that, on average, Canadians will spend $800 more on groceries this year. The Prime Minister's carbon tax is making a dire situation even worse. The number of food bank visits in Toronto are up 1 million people to 3.5 million visits, a 43% increase in new food bank users. Scurvy is on the rise. Food insecurity has surged more than 20%. All Canadians want for Christmas is a carbon tax election. When will this Prime Minister make that Christmas wish come true?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker. The very
No, Wreck-It Ralph.
Order.
Sounds like his head is full of a bag of nails. Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker.
Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker. The very report that the member's opposite site says that climate change is the greatest driver of food price inflation. It's the same thing Sylvain Charlebois said when he came to committee recently, and the Conservatives have no plan to fight climate change. In addition, we stepped up over the holidays to offer Canadians a GST tax cut. What did the Conservatives do? They opposed. When we step up to help children across Canada get food at school, what do the Conservatives do? They oppose. You want to make Canadians Canadians a Merry Christmas? Step up.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Well, I guess it would take a Festivus miracle to have a serious Prime Minister who understands that when you increase taxes on farmers who grows the food, truckers who move the food, you increase costs of the food. But after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, this is the Christmas list Canadians face. Grocery prices up $800. Price of food inflation is up 36% higher in Canada than the United States. A quarter of Canadians are skipping meals. When will this Prime Minister grant a common sense Christmas gift to Canadians and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
I would like to quote Mac Lévesque.
Hey, no phones! Come on!
Bank, and he says,
Mr. Speaker threw a tantrum the other day when the Conservatives had phones out.
Why? And I'm not in the habit of calling people liars. The report he's referring to does not mention that the carbon tax is a factor behind the $800 increase, and certainly does not say that carbon tax will cost families $800 more on food. That's coming from the Chief Security Officer at TD Bank, Mr. Speaker.
Money launderer, thanks.
Order. The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Under this Prime Minister, New Brunswickers continue to struggle and will now have to pay $800 more for food next year. After 9 years, the NDP Liberal carbon tax has caused the price of groceries to skyrocket. According to Food Bank Canada, the number of people accessing food banks increased by 73% the last 2 years. Over 1 million Ontarians are relying on food banks. That's more people that live in my home province. Canadians deserve better. Will the Prime Minister agree that now is the time to call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A reminder that that member and all of the Conservatives have had an opportunity to support the work that we're doing to provide relief to families in New Brunswick and across the country. I look to the National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker. So far, 4 provinces have signed on, meaning over 184,000 kids will receive food at school this school year. More than 1.5 million meals, Mr. Speaker. They could support us with affordability measures should they choose to do what's right, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, not a single plate of food has been served, and 1.4 million Canadian children living in poverty. The rise in the cost of food is a direct result of the carbon tax. The Prime Minister doesn't understand. If you tax the farmer that grows the food and the trucker that ships it, you end up taxing the family that buys it. Already the NDP Liberal carbon tax has resulted in food prices increasing 36% faster in Canada than across the border. Will the Prime Minister finally give Canadians the carbon tax election now?
So they're bragging about this child food program, but not a single plate of food has been served?
The words. He did hear some people intervening from the far end of the chamber.
How is that even right?
And this was brought up this morning in different meetings, but it's really important for members not to speak while other members are talking.
Can we get a fact check in the comments in the live chat?
That we could have for our members who use the translation devices so that they can hear what's going on in the House.
Food program that feeds bureaucracy.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just because a Conservative member of Parliament makes something up doesn't mean that it's true. The Minister of the Environment has quoted the actual report that says specifically that the price on pollution is not responsible for the increase in food prices. But if the Conservatives were honest with Canadians and wanted to actually do something to help them with the high cost of food over the holidays, they could support our GST tax break for Canadians that is taking the GST off of essential items, including groceries, Mr. Speaker. If they were honest with Canadians, they would support the school food program that is feeding 184,000 kids. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Once again, the honourable member from Abbotsford, I'm just going to ask him, please, not to take the floor unless recognised by the House so that everybody can participate. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, you know, we have this beautiful tradition in Canada. Children who write letters to Father Christmas. But this year, we've learned that Santa has never received so many letters from kids who are not asking for toys, but instead are asking Santa for food, scarves, winter coats and gloves.
For gas money.
Children are asking for after 9 years of this Liberal government. A $500 billion deficit from this government. Are they really proud of their record? The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Labour. Well, Mr. Speaker, I am left speechless by what my colleague says when he just voted against the GST break. Coats, mittens, children's clothes, and many other things like prepared foods and restaurants would all benefit from that. And so this member voted against that, and believe it or not, he also is against school food programs. He doesn't want to fund breakfasts and lunches in schools. It's unbelievable, Mr. Speaker.
It hasn't served anyone.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, I am against a 10-cent break on a bag of chips. What a huge difference. Well, real talk, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years of this government, 2 million Canadians are having to go to food banks. And food prices are going to go up by $800 next year due to this government's inflationary policies. After 9 years of this inflationary government with the support of the Bloc Québécois, is this government really proud of its economic record?
L'honorable ministre du Travail et des Aînés.
The Honourable Minister. Well, we are proud of the low rate of unemployment in Quebec, our record levels of foreign investment. This is a leading country on the world stage, and yet what does the member across the way say when we're offering a tax break on things like toys, Christmas trees, children's clothes, restaurant meals? Well, this member got up and voted against it. He keeps talking about affordability, but he voted against it. It's unbelievable. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, things are getting serious for Lion Electrique, and the Prime Minister should keep his promises. In 2021, the Prime Minister personally went to the Lion Electrique factory to announce billions of dollars in the Zero Emission Transit Fund. And the Prime Minister told the company to get ready to be snowed under by orders for buses from the rest of Canada. But that never happened. Why? Because the federal government refused to grant the full sums that it had said it would give in subsidies to potential buyers. So will the Prime Minister finally keep his promise and unblock the funds? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for the Bloc Québécois for his question. Lion Electrique is indeed an extremely important business when it comes to transit electrification, not just in Quebec, but elsewhere in Canada as well. And the federal program will enable municipalities to buy hundreds of electric buses. Thanks to that program, Mr. Speaker, unlike what my colleague for the Bloc Québécois and for the Conservative Party, what my colleagues have said. Order, please.
Well, he's losing control of the House again.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. L'honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
The Honourable Member. Well, this is talking about the future, and the future is too late. The Prime Minister didn't just make this promise to Lion Electrique. He also made promises to their workers, including the 400 who just got laid off right before the holidays. But at the time, the company took the Prime Minister at his word, and they opened a second battery factory in Mirabel. They hired people. They bought supplies. But then in the end, they are not getting orders because the federal government has not provided the funds it promised to potential buyers. The Prime Minister has had a role to play in the difficulties facing the company. So he needs to personally take action. Will he?
To the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we know where the puck is going in the world economy, which is towards...
You don't know where the fuck...
The clean...
Is that what he said? He doesn't know where the fuck Canada's going in the world economy?
To attract billions of dollars of investment to secure good-paying jobs for generations to come. That's precisely the work we've been doing. We know...
Someone give this guy a brain scan. No way he talks
in
like
electric
this.
buses and electric trucks in this country, and we'll make every effort to work with them to get projects across the finish line. This situation is being monitored closely, and we know how important it is to Quebec and the Government of Canada.
Yeah, I know he said fuck.
Then I have the deputy.
But if you say it like this, it doesn't sound like fuck.
Pierre Boucher-les-Patrettes-Verchères. Mr. Speaker, we know that the transit sector is going to have a green pivot. That includes school transit. It's completely inevitable that this is going to happen. But the real question is, when we do buy these electric buses, are we going to be buying Quebec buses built by Quebecers, or will we buy American buses built by Americans? Because Ottawa once again showed a lack of vision and abandoned this flagship company. Will this government finally wake up and unblock all of the money in the Zero Transit Emission Fund? The Honourable Minister of Housing. Mr. Speaker, through the Zero Emission Transit Fund, the federal government will be helping school bus and transit operators to electrify their transit fleet. This is essential. We need to invest to support this pivot in our economy in order to seize opportunities to build the green economy. I have spoken with my counterparts in Quebec in order to identify solutions, and we will continue to make all necessary investments to strengthen the green economy throughout the country, including in Quebec.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, as we approach Christmas, there is no joy. A recent study shows that more than 21% of Nova Scotia households were food insecure in 2022, which is a 17% year-over-year increase. And about 1/5 of those people who are food insecure seek help through services like food banks. As a result, food bank use in Nova Scotia has skyrocketed. Food bank leaders say it's a perfect storm between the rising cost of living, unaffordable housing, and inadequate income. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election today so that Nova Scotians can feed themselves with dignity?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Food insecurity is a very serious issue, including in my home province of Nova Scotia. But, Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take seriously the question from the Conservative Party members when they are literally opposing a tax cut on food.
It's a temporary tax cut, dickwad.
GST holiday in place to reduce the cost of food that people buy, including when they go out to eat at restaurants, including products that are not exempt at grocery stores. Mr. Speaker, I hope the honourable member will put his money where his mouth is and for once support a measure that is going to deliver meaningful financial relief to families in need.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland Colchester.
Well, Speaker, I suggest that member opposite go to the grocery store now again, because essentials, grocery essentials, are already GST exempt, and the temporary tax trickery on foods such as sugary and salty foods and coated candy, popcorn, beer, and ready-to-drink alcoholic drinks are certainly not going to help food insecurity on behalf of any Canadians. And we continue to see that accessing food banks has increased 73%, and now more than 1 million Ontarians are visiting food banks, which is 6 times the population of Prince Edward Island. Canadians need relief. Will they have a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
it is absolutely clear my honourable colleague was not listening to the answer to his first question before he delivered his second. I said specifically that we are exempting tax on food that is not already exempted from the GST, including food that people may purchase at a restaurant. Mr. Speaker, what's interesting is the Conservatives are opposed not just to the tax cut on holiday gifts, toys for kids, clothing for kids, diapers, car seats, and food. They oppose the measures we put in place to reduce the cost of living when we cut taxes for the middle class, when we stop sending childcare checks to millionaires so we can put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families. They just don't care about people. It's all politics.
I mean, you are a politician.
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Member from Regina Leuven.
Obviously, that minister hasn't been to a grocery store in a while. The NDP Liberals quadrupling of the carbon tax will cost Saskatchewan people $2,000 a year. Now, the latest food price report shows Canadians are being forced to buy less nutritious food because of the higher prices. This is Canada under that Prime Minister. To make matters worse, the average family will spend $800 additionally on groceries next year. Will these NDP Liberals finally do the right thing and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide between their plan to tax everything and our plan to axe the carbon tax on everything for everyone?
Forever!
Not just 60 days, man.
Order.
What a joke.
Order.
Karina Gould is drawing stickmen at the bottom left.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
She's playing tic-tac-toe.
Mr. Speaker, this feigned sympathy, these crocodile tears on behalf of the Conservatives is fooling no Canadian when the Conservatives had the opportunity to support measures that would help Canadians, measures like cutting their taxes, Mr. Speaker, they opposed. When we proposed a school food program that's going to help feed thousands of children across the country in their schools, Mr. Speaker, they opposed. Every time we try and help Canadians, Conservatives stand up and oppose that help, Mr. Speaker. Let us be clear. This Conservative leader does not have the interests of Canadians at heart.
Let us be clear, not let me be clear.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Parents are struggling to get their children the health care they need. 5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor and are relying on emergency rooms to get care. And ER visits are even higher for kids. A new report shows that 1 in 7 ER visits could have been treated in primary care. Liberals and Conservatives before them cut healthcare transfers, and it's led to this crisis. Why are the Liberals doing so little for Canadians for them to get the care they need?
They call a freaking election. Like, come on. You keep criticizing them.
Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. Canadians deserve good public health care across the country. That is why we as a government support publicly funded.
Show who's talking.
That is why we're making unprecedented investment in our healthcare system. $290 billion over 10 years across the country to every province and territory, with the sole purpose of ensuring that primary healthcare is available to all Canadians across this country. And we urge our provinces to take action to make sure that there are more doctors and nurses available in all those communities by using the federal dollars that have been transferred to them. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, everyone across Canada is feeling the high cost of living, and that's especially true for people living in the remote communities on Haida Gwaii, who are isolated from the mainland by a 7-hour ferry ride. Now there is a tax deduction that is meant to help people in remote communities afford the high cost of living. But 30 years ago, it was a Liberal government that cut Haida Gwaii's access in half. Now, they've been fighting to get it back ever since. And so my question is, will this Liberal government do the right thing and restore the full Northern residents tax deduction for the good people of Haida Gwaii?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question, a very important question. We've been working since day one on affordability issues for all people of the North and isolated communities. We've brought in a tax cut for groceries, for diapers, for essential items last week.
For 60 days, dickwad.
The National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives voted against it. There's more to do, but we'll get it done with partners.
The honourable member.
Man, there's something wrong with these people in the head. Like, seriously wrong.
Speaker, yesterday the government announced their intention to split the Online Harms Act into two parts, to move quickly, to act now, and to advance child protection measures. We've lost too much time because of the Conservative stalling tactics. I find it unconscionable that the Conservatives are opposed to forcing the removal of child sexual abuse material from the internet. Can the Minister of Justice explain why the updated Bill C-63 is essential for the safety of Canadians, especially our kids?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Auditor Attorney General.
Everything in my power to protect children. That is what splitting this bill is about. At committee this morning, Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda, said, quote, "I've waited 12 years for this because on day one of Amanda's death, I knew that things needed to change in terms of law, legislation, and online safety. I can't bring my child back, but we can certainly keep other children safe." Mr. Speaker, parents need our help. Children need our help. Bill C-63 is about protecting kids and saving lives. Every party in this chamber has a vested interest in doing just that. Will everyone find the courage to back this bill?
The honourable member for Kildonan, St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, last week the people of Toronto were shocked to see a man attempt a violent carjacking, shooting up cars all over the 401. And it's not just Toronto. Gun violence is up 116% under this Liberal government. In fact, it's the 9th consecutive year that gun violence has increased in this country. And what are the Liberals doing today, Mr. Speaker? Another announcement, but not targeting the criminals on the 401. No, targeting turkey hunters and sport shooters and trained, tested and vetted law-abiding Canadians. When are they going to realize that gun violence is only going to stop when they go after the criminals responsible for gun violence?
Yeah, not ban guns like what they're trying to do later today.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's quite shameful on the anniversary of one of the largest mass shootings targeting women in this country. The Conservatives seem to be more concerned about keeping guns on the street that are designed for the battlefield. Mr. Speaker,
Nope.
we are not going
You
to
can't buy a battlefield gun in
What
Canada.
we're doing is we're protecting our communities. In particular, we're protecting women who are disproportionately victims of gun violence while
By criminals who don't have who aren't law-abiding citizens who didn't acquire a gun legally.
keeping them safe.
Shut the fuck up. Suits and ties have never shot guns, never handled weapons, never done a safety course, or making decisions for law-abiding gun owners. Go fuck yourself.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan, St. Paul.
This Liberal government has no credibility when it comes to protecting women. In the 9 years they've been in power, sexual assaults have increased 75%. 94 municipalities and the province of Nova Scotia have declared intimate partner violence as an epidemic. In Canada, Mr. Speaker, one woman in Peel region is strangled to death every single day, and violent abusers of women are getting let out on bail easier than ever because of the Liberal Bill C-75. There's only one party in this place that's going to protect women from the monsters who abuse them, that's going to put criminals of gun violence behind bars, and that's the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. Win through to get elected.
Yeah, there you go.
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, our track record on protecting people from violence, on guns,
is fuck all, bro. The border crisis. People are bringing up guns from America into Canada illegally and giving them to criminals who don't have a legal gun license.
Not even hear the answer. Please,
Oh yeah, go after hunters.
While we hear the answer. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, our track record on protecting women from violence, from violent firearms, speaks for itself with respect to assault rifles, with respect to handguns. What I find actually quite appalling is that party's ability to stand up and talk about what women want in this chamber. Because when today, Barbara Lavers at the Justice Committee said on Bill C-63, we must work together as communities, families and governments to reduce the online abuse of our children. Social media platforms must be held accountable. They must help keep our children safe. Children like Harry are dying. Her son is dead because of online safety issues that party opposes. That's unconscionable.
The Honourable Order. The honourable member from Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, at the Status of Women Committee, we hear from abused woman after abused woman who have been hurt and their lives endangered because of Bill C-75. Their abusers are getting out on bail easier than ever before.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm having some...
Raquel is on fire today.
The honourable member from Kildonan St. Paul from the top, please.
Let's show some support. Drop some W's.
Statistics on women speak for themselves. 75% increase of sexual assaults. 75% increase since they've been in power. Sexual violations against children up 120%. And why is this? We've heard from Status of Women Committee over and over from abused women. It's Bill C-75. These monsters are getting out on bail and killing women. That's on this Liberal government, no matter what they say. Their announcement today will not protect a single woman in this country, Mr. Speaker. When are they going to call an election so that Conservatives can get in power and do something about it?
Yeah! There you go! There's a strong female leader, huh? Liberals wouldn't know about that.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, we're listening to women, we're listening to mothers. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection put out a promotional video about our work to combat online harms. They had the mother of Rehtaeh Parsons, the mother of Amanda Todd, the mother of Harry Burke, whom I just quoted. All three of these women share one thing in common. They desperately want this Parliament to keep Canadian children safe. We have a proposal to do exactly that by taking child pornography and child sex abuse material off of the internet. Surely, for the love of God, 338 people can agree on that priority.
Order.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we are ending the days of action against violence against women on a very bad note. In May 2020, this government unilaterally banned the use of legally obtained firearms by law-abiding citizens. In November 2022, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, they banned hunting weapons. While they go after honest citizens, gun violence has increased by 116% over the last 9 years. Illegal weapons are flowing freely across the border, and criminals are using them with impunity. Will this government please leave sports shooters and hunters alone and go after criminals?
Yeah. That would be nice, huh?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we have taken concrete action to remove from circulation war weapons, which were designed for the battlefield, Mr. Speaker. We are taking action against assault weapons that do not belong in our community, Mr. Speaker.
No such thing as assault weapon in Canada.
Shameful. It's the 35th anniversary of the Polytechnique shooting. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are standing up and repeating the falsehoods by the firearms lobby. The Honourable Member for Drummond. On Tuesday, Quebec's National Assembly made me very proud to be a Quebecer when it unanimously supported a motion denouncing hate speech and calling for an end to the religious exemption. Calling for someone's death in the name of God should not be more lawful or legitimate than calling for someone's death because you don't like them. Freedom of religion is not a license to propagate hatred, Mr. Speaker. If a religion is misogynistic or homophobic, then that's the problem, not women's and homosexuals. Why did the Liberals reject the motion to denounce the religious exemption, even though the motion was similar to the one passed unanimously on that same day by the National Assembly of Quebec?
Hey, just a reminder to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps grow the channel. It'd be much appreciated.
Justice and Attorney General. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are aware of the fact that hatred is rising in our communities and that there is an increase in anti-Semitism everywhere in Canada at the moment. The Bloc Québécois suggestion is a good one. We want to study it in depth. What I would like to underscore is what I've said many times before, which is that we already have in this place on the table legislation to combat hatred in Canada. That is Bill C-63. If they want to support that legislation, that would help all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Drummond. I barely got through a sentence of the motion yesterday when some members started shouting no. I only had time to say that the House of Commons declare that hate speech is not tolerable, and already the Liberals were saying no. There are people in this House who have no problem tolerating hate. People can say, "Go, God, kill all those miscreants." If we put it in God's hands, it becomes perfectly acceptable to make threats and spread hatred, according to the Liberals. The Liberal Justice Minister says he wants to ban hate speech. Well, how does he feel about Liberal MPs insisting that death threats should be legal as long as they are made in the name of God? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, hatred is on the rise, and it's up 130% as compared to a few years ago. All Canadians and Quebecers are experiencing this. We do wish to discuss the Bloc Québécois bill. We're very willing to debate it, but we already have C-63.
It's pretty wild, man. The Bloc is standing up against the Hamas protesters and stuff.
Québécois motion and bill.
This is very powerful. They haven't done this yet.
Punishment for hatred and those who incite hatred. So we need to do this work all together.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
It was just reported in Vancouver that 2 people were wounded in another random stabbing. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, these tragic stories are sadly more common as violent crime is up 50%. NDP Liberal soft on crime policies and laws have unleashed a crime wave across Canada, including random attacks. Bill C-75 created a catch-and-release bail system. Bill C-5 removed mandatory minimum sentences on many serious crimes. Will the Liberal government reverse these reckless policies?
The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-75 codified existing Supreme Court jurisprudence and added a tougher decision on bail for those who target women. That's the fact. Let's talk about the actual combat against crime. Let's talk about crimes against children. Mr. Speaker, you cannot make this up. What the Leader of the Opposition has said, what his justice critic has reiterated, is that no matter what progress we make with the help of the Bloc Québécois and the NDP on taking down child pornography off the internet, they will reverse it. That is morally bankrupt as a policy and incredulous to assert in this chamber. The combat against crime includes combat against child sex predators.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that was just a desperate and untrue response. And after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, Canadians don't even feel safe walking down the street, taking public transit, or even being in their own homes. Canadians want repeat violent offenders to remain behind bars and mandatory jail time for serious violent crimes. Small businesses have had it with the crime and the extra costs. Even every Canadian premier called on the Liberals to scrap the catch-and-release bail policies. So will the Liberals listen and reverse their reckless crime policies, or can they just get out of the way so a Conservative government can fix what they broke?
Yep. It's going to take some time, but I think they can do it.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the facts. The facts, as reported by CTV, are that the Conservative leader has vowed to repeal the legislation entirely should it become law. Yesterday, the Conservative justice critic indicated that it is exactly that. They would repeal online regulation bills passed by the Liberal government. You know, Mr. Speaker, that might deter some people. It sure as heck is not going to deter me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep Canadians safe. That means Canadian moms, Canadian children, and if I do that with my party's help, with the Bloc Québécois' help, and the NDP's help, so be it. I will do it over the opposition to the Conservatives because their position is bankrupt morally and endangers our kids.
Order.
I don't know about that one. It's pretty controversial, eh?
Order. The honourable member for Durham.
After a home invasion in Oakville, the Halton police chief said, "Yet another violent offender already out on similar and violent charges with court conditions on him. Anyone surprised that some of these violent criminals reoffend?" Mr. Speaker, I know someone who might be surprised. The Liberal Minister of Justice. Wow. Tragic and appalling. He thinks he knows more than police officers do in our country. So the question is, when will this Liberal government listen to police across Canada and stop violent criminals?
Great question. Great. I invite the honourable member for Ottawa Centre, please, not to take the floor when not recognized by the chair. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Here's an example of a few police officers that I'm listening to, Mr. Speaker. Deputy Chief in Vaughan, Alvaro Almeida, has said specifically that without investments in resources like courts and Crown attorneys, we can't actually keep the bad guys in jail. The National Police Federation, or police officers that I'm also listening to, what they've said is that it's interesting that in order to be appointed as a JP that decides bail in Nova Scotia, you have to have legal training before getting that appointment. That is not the case throughout the country, certainly not in the case in the province of Ontario that I call home. That's an issue that needs to be addressed because we all have a vested interest in keeping people safe.
Again, I'm going to ask the honourable member, who's a new member from Durham, not to take the floor, especially after I asked a question. It's important for us to hear the response. L'honorable député de Sudbury.
The honourable member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, our government is implementing a tax holiday for all Canadians, effective December 14th. This is a move by our government to help Canadians celebrate during the holidays without additional costs. And this will be real savings on children's clothing, food, and many other essential items. But the Conservatives voted against our tax holiday. Could the minister explain how this government will help Canadians financially and give them a bit of relief during the holiday time?
For 60 days, like, how messed up in the head do you have to be to support something that's only 60 days for a tax cut?
Economic Development Agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, what is the Conservative leader doing for people? To give them a tax holiday? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's a movie everyone watches during the holiday season, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Well, that's happening right here, Mr. Speaker. The movie, though, has a happy ending. The Grinch's heart gets bigger, but the Conservative leader's heart is not getting bigger. He just doesn't want to help Quebec and Quebec families buy toys, diapers, or groceries. Mr. Speaker, Canadians can definitely not trust or have confidence in the Conservative Party's leader.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 8 months since fiscal year end. How are we supposed to vote on billions in spending and taxation without the deficit number? Speculation is that the government has blown through its deficit anchor, its fiscal anchor, despite the finance minister promising that, quote, "This is our fiscal anchor, a line we shall not cross, and that will ensure our finances remain sustainable so long as it remains unbreached." So what's the deficit? How big is the breach, and how unsustainable are federal fiscal finances?
Wow. Great. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
I'm happy to do that. Let him run.
Mr. Speaker, we have the lowest deficit of all of our G7 peers.
Did she glitch? What the hell was that?
Ratio, and it will be our pleasure to present a fall economic statement so that all Canadians can see what the books look like, include the Conservative Party. But Mr. Speaker, we also need to support Canadians. We also need to have affordability measures, and that's why we're cutting taxes for Canadians. We're giving Canadians a tax break, and the Conservatives have no explanation for why they want to deny Canadians a tax holiday.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, here's what Stephen Paulus, the past governor of the Bank of Canada, said just 2 days ago. I would say we're in a recession. Yeah. I wouldn't even call it a technical one.
Wow.
The past governor says we're in a recession. The current deputy governor of the bank says it's an emergency. So when will the government start listening to the experts and understand that its policies on its budgets, its spending, and its deficits, whatever the number is, have caused a recession and an economic emergency?
Yep. It's crazy. Previous Bank of Canada governor said we're in a recession.
Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
I have to say, I am quite disappointed in the Conservative member opposite. He should know what the definition of a recession is. We haven't even had a single quarter of negative growth. In fact, Statistics Canada has just revised our growth numbers upwards for the last 3 years. They would like to quote former governors of the Bank of Canada. I've got one. David Dodge just said that because the Conservative Party was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit between 2011 and 2015, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower, rather more muted recovery. Wow. This Liberal government has ensured a very strong recovery, the strongest in the G7.
The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
After 9 years of broken fiscal promises, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister has zero credibility. He promised that the budget would balance itself. His Finance Minister promised that the 2023 deficit would not exceed $40 billion. Now, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has told us that this Liberal government has shattered through their $40 billion deficit promise by $7 billion. So I have one question for the Prime Minister. What is the deficit?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Speaker, what we hear on the other side of the House is not resonating with Canadians. The reason being, because Canadians in their time of need require a government that recognizes that their supports for dental care, supports for pharmacare, supports for a national school food program, supports for the most vulnerable in our economy are ones that the Conservatives ignore. They vote against every single time, Mr. Speaker, and on this side of the House, we will always be there to support Canadians in their time of need.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, the government is introducing a 2-month tax break for all Canadians. Starting December 14th, we're taking the GST.
Bet you're real proud of that. Not 3 months.
As well as prepared foods.
Just 2 months.
And restaurant
Bet you're
meals.
real proud of
That
that.
after all their preaching about cutting taxes, the Conservatives would walk the walk and support this measure. But they voted against it. Why won't they axe this tax? Can the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure tell us why axing this tax on the middle class is important for all Canadians? Merry Christmas, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
That's right, Mr. Speaker. Despite positioning themselves in a contrary way, these guys are all tax and no axe. They're literally opposing
such a dumb saying.
essentials over the holidays. We're talking about food, about clothes, about diapers, about car seats, about snowsuits for kids. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that they want to cut is the programs that are delivering real support to Canadians. They want to cut the programs that are helping get homes built across this country. They want to cut the programs that are actually...
Yeah, they're pausing the tax. They're not axing anything.
They will not stand up for working families. They've had the chance, and they said no.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Alberta has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and yet we have documents showing that Premier Daniel Smith is organizing a secret mission to bring over cheap labour from the United Arab Emirates, of all places. This is at the same time that the UCP state they find it, quote, disgusting that workers from other parts of Canada are working in the oil patch. Now, Liberals and Conservatives have allowed big CEOs to drive down wages and exploit foreign workers while leaving Albertans who need jobs left behind. So to the Minister for Workplace Development, will she stand up to Daniel Smith and defend the jobs of Alberta workers? Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Veterans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government's priority is to offer Canadians good jobs, good, well-paying jobs. We prioritize Canadian workers. We are aware of workers' business needs, and that's why we have made changes to the temporary foreign worker program so that we can meet the needs of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we are always there to support Canadian workers. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, affordable housing dollars should go towards building truly affordable homes. Yet that's not the case most of the time. All because CMHC doesn't use any affordability criteria for the majority of units they fund, and even when they do, they rarely use their own definition of affordable housing. It's why I've introduced a motion that follows the calls of housing experts like Dr. Caroline Weitzman to require income-based definitions across all affordable housing programs. Will the Minister listen to these experts and take up this important call?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great respect for my honourable colleague, as I do Dr. Weitzman, who I've had the opportunity to benefit from on a number of occasions when it comes to receiving her advice. The majority of our grant programs that deliver cash subsidies to affordable housing projects are designed to support social housing, nonprofit housing, housing for low-income families. We do have a range of other programs, including financing, that delivers market-based housing with certain affordability criteria to make sure we can build more middle-class homes as well. I look forward to continuing to work with that member and other members of this House who want to advance these important conversations and get more homes built, including in places like Kitchener. Thank you.
And so we come to an end of question period today. There are some members who are rising on a point of order. The honourable member.
So they're going to be debating the motion very soon, folks.
Speaker, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion, that notwithstanding any standing...
No.
So I'm afraid I'm not hearing. I'm going to ask the honourable member. I'm afraid that there are many indications of no for that consent for unanimous consent. Order, please.
Oh, he's angry. He's going to mute the mic.
The honourable member, please take your seat. The honourable member for Regina Capel is rising. Order. The honourable member from Regina Capel is rising on a point of order.
Find consent for this motion that the House recognize everyone living in First Nation communities should have access to safe, clean drinking water, and condemn the Liberal government which has failed after...
So I'm afraid the honourable member from Regina Capel, I'm hearing a lot of no.
So the Liberals don't want Indigenous communities to have clean drinking water. They just voted it down. Isn't that crazy?
I see that the honourable member...
How do you not have unanimous consent for that?
Victoria is rising on this, looking for a point of order. I hope it is a different point of order than that was raised before, which had been refused by the House. I am asking the honourable member if he is rising on a different point of order than the one that was just refused by the House. I see no other points of order. It being 3:21, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the previous question, to the motion to concur in the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Call on the members. Oh, please.
All right, so they're going to be doing something here. They're going to be debating the motion very, very soon. That's pretty bananas. Andrew Scheer's laughing. You can see him down there. He's laughing with Karina Gould. Kind of crazy that they didn't have unanimous consent for Indigenous communities to have clean drinking water. Like, that's bananas to me. I don't understand that. The Liberals shot that down. That's pretty freaking weird. I can't believe, like, how could you be Indigenous or support Indigenous people and support the Liberals and the NDP? They literally are failing to provide clean drinking water and infrastructure to Canadians.
Just making sure that everyone is ready. The question is on the previous question in relation to the motion to concur in the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development.
Victoria, seconded by Ms. McPherson, move that this question be now put. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started in the House. We'll now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Suds.
Ms. Suds.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Ms. Jasic.
Ms. Jasic.
Mrs. Romanato.
Mrs. Romanato.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Canada's approach to sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Mr. Yakuno.
So they're going to do...
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Souza.
So this is a vote
Duguid.
about sexual rights.
Mr.
A couple little things to do
Mr. Sarai.
before we get
Mr.
into
Kellaway. Ms. Vandenbeld.
into the debate on the motion. of non-conference.
Madame Pierre. Mr. Fisher. Mr. Long. Mr. Morrissey. Ms. Cedar Brampton South. Ms. Hefner. Mr. Noor Mohammed. Mr. Chang. Mrs.
I'm
Zaid.
going to read off some super chats in the meantime here.
Rogers. Ms. Yip.
Jordan English with a 2 saying this fellow's on point.
Kitchener-Conestoga.
I'm assuming that wasn't about me, but I'll pretend that was about me.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Coney Smile with a 2.
Ms. Bradford.
The holy then thou house of the liberals.
Madame Lapointe.
Pretty much.
Thompson.
Ms. Thompson.
Madame Larouche. Monsieur Barcelot-Duval. Monsieur Lemire. Monsieur Trudel. Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca. Madame
Andre with the 2 saying gun ban to be announced later.
Ms. Matheson.
Another OIC.
Ms. McPherson.
Oh, for crying out loud. Eh? That's what they're pushing forward, a gun ban today.
Ms. Dance. Mr. Backrack. Ms. Blaney.
Jordan English with the 2.
Madame Hughes.
I forgot this is Thursday. Better grab a coffee.
Mr. Angus.
I mean, it's past noon now. I'm on the West Coast, so everyone else is beer drinking time.
Ms. Zerillo. Mr. Morris.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Down to the wire welder with a 2. Climate change earthquake.
Mr. Schmale. Mr. Bazan.
That's about the.
Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, there's a tsunami warning in California on the west coast of America.
Mr. Poilievre. Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Next row with the 5.
Mr. Ellis.
Gun bans, abortion rights, ban energy, LGBTQI plus ABCDFG rights.
Mr. Couric. Mr. Jennings.
Lots is happening right before the holidays. I'll tell you that much.
Mr. Abultaif.
A lot is happening.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Next, we're going with the 5. Will Peter Julian stand up and unblock me?
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton.
I don't think that
Mrs. Goodridge.
that you should be allowed to be like a federal MP and have a government check mark and be allowed to block anybody.
Mr. Tucker.
That should be illegal.
Mrs. Cramp-Nyman. Madame Viet.
Andre with the 2 say press conference at 4:30 p.m. to announce the gun ban. That's probably Eastern Standard Time.
Mr.
So that's in an hour from now.
Mr. Lobb. Mr. Mazer. Mr. David.
I know that here in our town, Alberta, businesses donate to put food into our schools to feed kids, says
Mr. Zimmer.
Deborah. Sept
Mr. Majumdar.
or Deborah with the 699.
Mr. Tolmie.
I honestly would trust communities donating to
Allison.
to feed kids at schools more than I would
Mr. McLean.
the government with their rollout program.
Mr. Shields. Mr.
I can't believe that the government spent
Mr.
fucking
Arnold.
billions on
Mr. Soroka.
feed the kids at school program, and not a single meal
Mr. Vierson.
has been provided to a kid. That's
Mr.
freaking
Lewis Essex.
insane. That's insane.
Mr. Giovanni.
Ryuk.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting
Ryuk
period to end
with the 2 saying I'm
before
from
resuming its proceedings.
Boyston, and I wish you Northerners good luck. That wasn't a very good Boston accent, was it? Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, Libs are voting yay. The Bloc is voting yay, and the Conservatives are voting nay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Ah, some big eyes on this person here. Yeah, so it looks like only the Conservatives are voting nay. Canada's approach to sexual and reproductive rights? I don't exactly know what this is about. All right. What else we got here in the meantime? Matt the electrician with 279 saying Raquel. He said Rachel, but I'm assuming you're talking about Raquel should donate some hair to a reef. Yeah, something's wrong with these people. Weird looking people. Konisma with the 2. A cat can balance better than they can a budget. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, we're gonna find out soon what the budget looks like, aren't we? Craziness. I mean, we're just running billions of dollars deficits year over year over year. All right, we're gonna find out what they're talking about right now. So what they're voting on right now, that pursuant to Standing Order 108, subsection 2, given recent reports of international backsliding related to women's sexual and reproductive health and rights, the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs undertake a comprehensive study on the global access to the full range of health services, including family planning and modern contraception, comprehensive sexuality education, safe and legal abortion and post-abortion care, laws restricting or prohibiting women's rights to abortion, the medical importance of maintaining the right to access safe abortion and prevention and treatment of HIV and AIDS and sexually transmitted infections, and what actions Canada can undertake to support women's sexual and reproductive health and rights globally, that the committee report its findings to the House, and that this study does not begin prior to October 1st, 2022. It's essentially about being more sensitive to sexual diseases and to protect women's rights in a very woke way. Yeah, I'll be honest, I did not comprehend a single thing I just read. If you put a gun to my head and said, summarize what you just said, Sunshine, I'd say, fucking shoot me. I got no idea what I just read. It's so stupid. The wording on this is why people don't care about politics, is because the wording on this stuff is just so dumb. It's so dumb and absurd that it's just a deterrent. And I know a lot of people may come to this channel or my other channels and say, all right, I'm just looking for a summary. Dude, so am I half the time. That's the thing. Is, yeah, okay, I got videos that can break this down and offer summary, but I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. There's a lot of brain power, a lot of resources that go to actually dissecting this stuff. This is why people don't care about politics. People don't care about politics because of this crap. It's just so absurdly written. It should be like the bill. And then, I mean, I guess you could just throw it into like AI. You could just throw it into, I mean, maybe there's some people that do that. I'm just thinking about that right now. That's pretty decent, summarize this in one sentence type of thing. Yeah, maybe. They want, so the cryptic sense with the $6.99 saying they want abortions to be allowed up to birth, just like in California. So you can already do that. I've looked into that. When I had my kids, man, when my daughter was about to be born, I got like pretty emotional because I found out that you can have an abortion pretty much right up until birth in Canada. Now, it's under extreme circumstances, right? You can't just decide you don't want it because you don't want it. But right up until birth, I believe in Canada, you can have an abortion. Now, it would be like if the mother passes, like gives birth to the child and she's going to die, and the only way around it is to abort literally when she's, about to have the kid, then in Canada that's deemed okay. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to be sharing some misinformation here, but if I'm not mistaken, I remember when my wife's and I's daughter was about to be born, I looked into this stuff, and that's kind of the conclusion I found. I was going to do a social experiment. I was going to call a couple different abortion clinics and just pretend, right? Just kind of go through the motion and record it and see what the hell's going on. But yeah, it's pretty disgusting. It is, absolutely. It is very disgusting. It's very gross. Did Randy vote? I don't know. I didn't notice. I was too busy talking. So government bills are let's see here. So no, in Canada there are no laws about abortions. It doesn't even have to be an exceptional circumstance. So you can technically, yeah, a woman's. So I'm being fact checked in real time. So you don't even have to. If they decide they don't want it, they can do it. Yeah, right up until birth. Right up until birth. If you decide you don't want it, you could do it. So let me paint a picture here. If a woman is 8 months in, 8 months in to her pregnancy and just decides, you know what? I don't want the baby. If that baby could be taken out in a C-section, cut her up, remove the baby, put the baby on a form of life support, or, maybe it's okay to survive on its own. Maybe the baby can survive on its own. Instead of doing that, because it's her body, her choice, you can just decide to abort.
I wish to inform the House that the electronic voting period has ended.
None able to vote due to technical difficulties. They may now use the raise hand function, and the chair will recognize them. Mr. El Khoury.
Mr. Speaker, I voted electronically, but I got a message to reconfirm my vote with you if it's counted as yea.
It is pretty sick, eh?
Okay. Mr. beaucoup. Quelqu'un d'autre? Anybody else? No. The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 209, 209. Nays contre 115, 115.
I declare the motion carried. The next question is as follows. Ms. McPherson, seconded by Ms. Zerillo, moves to the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development, presented on Friday, June 16, 2023, be concurred in. If a member participating in person wishes the motion be carried or carried on division, or if a member of a recognized party participating in person wishes to request a recorded division, I'd invite them to rise and indicate it to the chair. Charles Lemoine.
Yes, I request a recorded division.
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Gould.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Romanato.
Mrs. Romanato.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Mr. Kuzmarchak.
Mr. Kuzmarchak.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Mr. Yacono.
Monsieur Yacono.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mr. Souza.
Mr. Souza.
Mr. Duguid.
Mr. Duguid.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Mr. Sanson.
Monsieur Sanson.
Madame Brière.
Madame Brière.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Miss Cedar Brampton South.
Miss Cedar Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Miss Hepner.
Miss Hepner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Mrs. Zaid.
Mrs. Zaid.
So right now this is a bunch of procedural
Miss Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
crap.
Louis Kitchener-Conestoga.
They're supposed to be doing the non-confidence debate.
Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
But as we all know, government and parliament sucks ass. And everything takes time. Lots of time.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Larouche.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Madame Bérubé.
Madame Bérubé.
Mr. Julian.
For the most part, I try to personally stay out of the whole abortion stuff. You know, it's just a dude. It's like,
Miss Dance.
Miss Dance.
Mr. Backrack.
But after having kids, man, knowing that in Canada you can abort right up until birth, it breaks my heart.
Mr. Angus.
So I've tried talking about it a little bit more recently. But
Mr.
it's just so messed up.
Ms. Zerillo.
Ms. Zerillo.
Mr. Morris.
Mr. Morris.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Shear.
Mr. Shear.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Deltel.
Mr. Deltel.
Mr. Paulus.
Monsieur Paulus.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
They got to trim the fat. They got to trim the fat. I get procedure. Hey, look, I'm not one to change something that's been set in stone for a long, long time. But man, this could be so avoided.
Mr. Workington.
One by one, by one, by one, by one, by one. Just lock in your vote, dude. Put a screen on every single table. And then, boop, secure your vote.
West.
There you go.
Mr. Lloyd.
Parliament's got to get with times.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Look, society's moving in a very fast and rapid way.
Mrs. Roberts.
And this shit has to change. This is so slow.
Canna.
Mr. Canna.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Mrs. Gallen.
Mrs. Gallen.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Généreux.
Monsieur Généreux.
Like these people are paid a lot of money right now
Mr. Mazer.
to sit there on their phones phones and wait for
Mr. Martel.
350 other people basically to say yes or no.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. 2 seconds per person.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Allen.
And that doesn't count the electronic votes.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. McLean.
And this happens for every
Mr. Shields.
For every motion.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Lewis Essex.
Mr. Lewis Essex.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming proceedings.
Oh my God. Here we go again. Oh my God. Is this Groundhog Day? Didn't we just do this? Didn't we just do this? Look, all the liberals are voting yay and the conservatives are voting nay. Oh my God, let's just fast forward. Huh? Come on, man. And the Bloc's voting yay. This is so stupid. 5 minutes. Look, it's 6 minutes. 6 minutes of extra voting. These people are paid. They're paid for this. They're paid for this. They're paid to go around one by one. And you now have the torch to talk. Here, say what you want to say. Man, no wonder people don't give a rat's ass about politics. My biggest fear, one of my biggest fears growing up was that I would turn into like an angry, disgruntled old man. I think I'm already there. If I'm being honest, I think I'm already there. Yeah, it's just this shit just takes forever. Let's make me bigger here. Here we go. Look at that, huh? Yeah, I don't know what's going on here, folks. This is like, let's be more efficient. Let's be more efficient. Why are we doing a system that was designed over a year ago? Fuck's sakes, over 100 years ago. We're following 100+ tradition, and one by one, like, dude, are you kidding me? You could solve world hunger with a text message. Like, seriously, you could solve poverty with a text message, with a tweet, with a post on social media. Like, this shit is nuts. It's nuts. And anyone who likes this system, this long, tedious system where these people are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for all these breaks. Think about it. You go to your job, and if you're caught slacking for like a few minutes, you think your boss is going to be like, hey, that's a well-deserved few-minute unscheduled break. Good job. Keep it up. Or do you think your boss is going to be like, hey, come on. What are you doing here? Put your phone down. Get back to work, right? Same shit with this. Come on. Why are these people up on a pedestal? They're not even unionized. They don't get union breaks. Talk about transparency and efficiency. We need Elon Musk's Doge here in Canada. We need somebody to go over all the finances, all of the efficiency. Like, this is just such a old, broken system. And I'm turning it into my nightmare, right? My biggest fear was literally that I'd just be like so anti-establishment, like that angry old person that lives on a farm, right? That's me. I want to live on a farm. That's what we're doing next. We're going to be buying a plot of land and growing our own food and talking shit about the government. Like, that's where I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. I've turned into the thing that I swore I would never turn into. Oh, man, that's funny how that works. It's funny how that works. I'm going to get myself down the road. I'm going to get myself a Nokia flip phone. I'm going to get myself a Nokia flip phone and a old carburetor pickup truck where there's no electronic components. And that's how we're going to live out on the farm, growing our own food. I'll be on Starlink with a VPN, and that's it. I'll have a septic tank and a well, and I'll just be giving the finger to the system, man. That's exactly what I'm turning into. Someone says I'm losing it. No, I'm not. I'm waking up. I'm waking up to the system. I'm waking up to what's going on. Someone says Randy voted. Randy Bobandy voted, eh? I'm sure he voted yay. You still got to pay property tax? Yeah, I know. That sucks. You don't ever own fully your property. But you know what I'm saying? You get 100 plus acres. No one knows what's really there. Property taxes, they expand based off the value of what's on the property. So vacant land property tax, a few $100 a year. You know what I'm saying? Then you put a house on there right off the road, and then the government knows, all right, you got a house. Let's see. What's the value of this? That's a $350,000 house that you built. All right, your property taxes go up $5,000-$6,000 a year. But you build like a shitbox in the front of the property and then a stellar cabin out back, you know, on the other side of the acreage. Who's going to know? They'll never know. Don't be suspicious. Yeah, I don't know. We're heading down a weird path, Canada. We're heading down a weird path. It's going to get worse. People I grew up around used to speak like this when I was a kid, and I was like, you're crazy. You're crazy, granddad. You're crazy. You know? And here we are. Joke's on me, I guess. What do they vote on? They're voting on women having the right to abort up until the baby's born. Some stupid thing like that. But after this, they're going to be debating. They're going to be debating on the non-confidence. One of Pierre's promises when he gets into power is to reduce the amount of fluff in the bills, like the one I read earlier about sexual rights. Okay, good. I like that about Pierre. You know, he seems to be doing good. Like, his promises are good. I hope he stays true, man. I don't want to be, look, I get it. I got some YouTube channels, right? They're all about politics. I don't want to be talking about politics forever. I want politics to be boring. I want no fluff in the bills. Any person can read a government bill and say, that's what that is. Okay, great. Moving on with their life. Not reading it and getting a headache and a migraine and going, what the fuck did I just read?
The electronic voting period has ended. If members are unable to vote due to technical difficulties, they use the raise hand function, and the chair will recognize them. Nobody on Zoom, nobody in the chamber. The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 208, 208. Nays contre 114, 114.
I declare the motion carried. Take this one. Wish to inform the House that because of deferred recorded divisions, the time provided for government orders will be extended by 23 minutes. I see a point of order. The honourable member for Fredericton. Okay, hold on. We're having trouble getting the mic up. There we go. The honourable member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising on a point of order because I believe when the member from Sydney, Victoria was raising his point of order that there may have been filming taking place in the chamber. I wonder if you could take the opportunity to remind all members that when the mace is on the table that that's unacceptable. Thank you.
I will simply say ditto. That is the rule. When the mace is on the table, there is no other recording to be happening in the chamber. I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Désirez informer la Chambre que le volume des oreillettes.
The volume of earpieces will be reset. A point of order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In this situation, I'd like to I'd like you to check the cameras and make sure that if anyone has taken pictures or film, that this be taken away, because people aren't supposed to film. But can we make sure that photos or video film will be removed?
Wow, they don't want a repeat of what happened the other day when they threatened the Conservatives right to their face.
Right. Orders of no. Oh, yeah. Thursday question. Well, I guess one of our favorite times, and I almost forgot about it. The Thursday question, the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
I heard the Minister of Labour saying, please give a speech, so I'll maybe go beyond my normal short interventions. But honestly, I think most members of Parliament would like to know if the Government House Leader can update the House as to the business of next week, should her government survive the confidence vote that is on Monday. We know there's mixed messages coming from the NDP. We have put forward a common sense motion agreeing with the NDP's words when he said that the government was too selfish and too beholden to corporate greed to protect the rights of workers. We expect the NDP will support that they would not swallow themselves whole and demonstrate to Canadians the heights of their hypocrisy. So we expect that the government will fall on Monday, counting on the NDP to declare confidence in their leader by agreeing with his words. So should that not be the case and the NDP turn out to be flip-floppers and hypocrites, we would like to know what the government would be calling for the rest of the week.
What the fuck, Andrew Scheer?
Mr. Speaker, despite what the Conservatives might think, I don't actually think Canadians want them door-knocking at Christmas. But what I can say is that we are looking forward very much to being here next week. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes...
Mr. Speaker, here we are already in December, and there are less than 2 weeks left before we adjourn for the holidays. I'm very proud that last week our government was able to pass C-78, a very important government initiative which will allow Canadians to save money substantially thanks to a GST, HST holiday.
That indeed all honourable colleagues in this place are well aware that tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday will be opposition days. On Tuesday night, members of Parliament will have the opportunity to vote on the Supplementary Estimates B, which includes funding on important issues for Canadians such as dental care, housing, Indigenous reconciliation, the National School Food Programme, and much, much more. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I would like to inform the House that the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth will deliver a ministerial statement tomorrow to commemorate the tragic 35th anniversary of the massacre at the Polytechnique. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci.
I thank the honourable member for laying out our work for the next few days. Order du jour.
Orders of the day. Government order resuming study of an opposition motion of Mr. Poilievre.
Cette affaire, l'honorable.
When we last were on this matter, the Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that my friends across the way will like the rest of my speech.
About the abject hypocrisy of the Leader of the Opposition when it comes to working people and unions and the labour movement in this country. I'm going to quote a few things here, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader said that union contracts that pay workers a decent wage result in a, quote, pointless, unnecessary inflation of costs, that non-union firms with lower wages are good for competition. He also said he cannot simply comprehend that union firms can in fact be competitive with non-union ones, Mr. Speaker. That's the Leader of the Opposition that's prancing around talking about workers in this House, where he's determined to deny them their historic and decades-long and hard-fought rights, Mr. Speaker. The Government of Canada is committed to promoting safe, healthy, fair and inclusive working conditions. As of the 15th of December 2023, federally regulated employers are required to provide sanitary products to all female employees in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, for years, also, replacement workers have been a distraction to the collective bargaining process, and those days are coming to an end. That's because on June 20th, 2024, Bill C-58, an act to amend the Canada Labour Code and the Industrial Relations Board Regulations 2012, received royal assent. When it comes into force on June 20th, 2025, it will ban replacement workers in federally regulated sectors. Monsieur le Président, il peut être
Mr. Speaker, it can be extremely difficult to lose a child. And this is why the government has introduced a leave for a woman who has lost a child so that they can deal with this very difficult period. Adoptive parents and those having use of a surrogate will also benefit. There will be a leave of 16 weeks for parents in these cases.
Rapidly, and with it, so will the workforce. Increased availability of mobile technologies has led to 20% of Canadians primarily working from home in 2023. In 2016, it was only 7%. But remote workers are often required to be constantly available, which can lead to stress and burnout, ultimately impacting their mental health. So we passed legislation, Mr. Speaker, to bring a right to disconnect into this new world of work. This measure will help restore the balance for nearly 500,000 federally regulated employees. Et Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement du Canada...
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is committed to wage parity and an inclusive, fair workplace. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's the intelligent thing to do. Canadians should be able to count on equal pay for work of equal value. This is why we want a law on wage parity. The government wants to implement this so that people can get equal pay for work of equal value.
Mr. Speaker, and Canadians who are watching this debate and the cynical ploys of the Conservative Party of Canada must ask themselves, what of these some dozen or more tangible, real, legislative accomplishments for working Canadians, which one of those would the Leader of the Opposition have brought in? The answer, Mr. Speaker, is none. The answer is this Conservative Party would not have initiated any pro-worker or progressive reforms to the Canada Labour Code that help Canadians in their jobs, in their lives, and to achieve the kind of balance that we all seek in this very complicated time and these very complicated times at work. The answer is these Conservatives would have done none of that. What we have, rather, is a Conservative leader and a Conservative Party trying to gaslight Canadians into thinking they're friends of workers. They are not, and the facts speak for themselves. In his own words, the leader of the Conservative Party has called into question the very basis and structure of labour unions, claiming union dues are, quote, forced on workers, and called into question the role of workers in collective bargaining in Canada. He complains that, quote, if the union has the power to shut down a workplace, legal powers give the union a state-enforced monopoly on labour. Those were the words of the member of Carleton on May 29, 2012 in the House of Commons, Mr. Speaker. Those were the words of the member of Carleton in the House of Commons. The Conservative leader, this Conservative leader, has attacked union jobs and union wages as fattened union contracts. But my colleagues and I are proud that we've turned back this movement and proud of the significant progress that we've made over the years. And we're not going back, Mr. Speaker. So we'll keep listening and working alongside unions and other parties in this House and progressive Canadians everywhere to make sure we continue to be there for working Canadians and continue to provide the things and the reforms and the guarantees that we know they're entitled to and that Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, cynically would take away. This motion deserves to be defeated. It is a cynical ploy. The Conservative Party is not pro-worker, Mr. Speaker. It is anti-worker, sont anti-travailliste, et j'exhorte.
It is anti-labour, anti-worker, and I would ask all members in this House to vote no to this motion. Questions and comments?
The member for Calgary Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr.
So they're
Speaker. And I heard
debating
that speech from the other side there.
right now.
And this is
the confidence motion, folks.
Saying, okay, if you say something in this House of Commons, if you say something to the Canadian people, if you say something to your electoral base, you actually have to be held to account for that. And we're actually siding with the NDP on this motion and asking them to put their motions where their mouth is out on the hustings here and actually vote this government out, because this government clearly, according to their words, has indicated that they don't deserve to be in power, that they were beholden to special interests and should be voted out. So will that member acknowledge that at least when the NDP are saying this, they're saying this against their government, and perhaps that should be weighed in this House of Commons?
Honourable Minister.
Here's what needs to be weighed by that member and all of the members of this House of Commons. They're asking the New Democratic Party to vote for a leader who says, quote, the union has the power to shut down a workplace. Legal powers give the union a state-enforced monopoly on labor. Those are the exact words of the member for Carleton, the leader of that member's party. The leader of the opposition has said these are fattened union contracts, state-enforced monopolies on labor. That's what this member is asking all members of this House to vote for. That's ridiculous, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I know we're now getting to the holiday season. I know that at this time of year, the government likes to vaunt its accomplishments. So we're more in like a Disney world than in the real world. They talk about the marvelous things that they've been able to accomplish. But I'm going to talk about reality and bring it back to a specific point. You know that over the past years in Quebec and in Canada, what we are witnessing is an increase in homeless people. There are whole groups of them. You could see them everywhere in Canada and everywhere in Quebec.
Ça, c'est une réalité réelle. Par contre, il y a un programme libéral. Le seul programme qui fait face à l'itinérance, c'est le programme Vers un chez soi.
Translator gave up.
Amputé de 3%. Comment on peut accepter que le gouvernement ait coupé 3% dans un programme si fondamental?
Le ministre.
Très content que le député puis il parle du bilan du gouvernement. C'est un député qui n'aura jamais de bilan car il ne sera jamais.
Oh, this is crazy, eh? No translator?
Une situation très sérieuse qui est l'itinérance.
About a very serious.
There you go.
They
thought nobody was paying attention.
But we have invested record amounts of $110 billion in the national housing strategy since we have been in power, and we also offered Quebec to we have offered $50 million to Quebec to help with this. So this amount is going to help Quebecers, and so I hope you will join me in accepting our offer to double the amount and help homeless people in Quebec. Questions and comments?
Ms. James Bay.
It's always depressing watching how juvenile my Conservative colleagues are. Today they just voted to consign women to backroom abortionists and then think everyone else is going to join them in a Christmas election. I believe, though, the desperation is information is starting to come out about how that member got into the 19-room mansion at Stornoway. I would bring forward the recent report in Radio Can that said that the member for Nose Hill, Calgary was involved with Indian agents for the Modi government to pull out of that leadership race support and allow the member who's now in Stornoway. These are serious allegations. There's been numerous allegations with CSIS about how that member got to the position he was at, because it certainly wasn't from talent. I'd like to ask my honourable colleague if he's concerned that they refused to get a security clearance or whether he simply is unable to pass a security clearance.
Bro, shut the fuck up.
Honourable Minister.
No one believes this leader of the opposition. He won't stand up for Canada, and he's in the right-wing echo chamber with respect to trade with the United States. He failed to stand up for farmers and for others in a bumper crop. There's these foreign interference allegations, and he's quite right. The member for Calgary Nose Hill ran as fast as I've ever seen anyone run away from a camera. He refuses to get a security clearance, Mr. Speaker. What is he hiding? What is going on? Who is the member for Carleton, the leader of the opposition, working for, Mr. Speaker?
The Canadian people. Who are you working for?
King's hands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we're here debating a confidence motion in the Prime Minister and the government, which gives members of Parliament a great opportunity to, I think, lay out a number of variety of issues of not only the government, but of course the Conservatives are bringing this motion. So it gives an opportunity to examine
and look under the hood of where that party stands on a number of issues, and including some that are just simply not clear yet. So I look forward to using the next 10 minutes, Mr. Speaker, to go through a number of different things of how I view this government, that I sit on this side of the House, the government caucus. I don't sit in the Privy Council. So I'll talk about where I see things that the government has done well, things that I think we need to do better, but also compare and contrast to where the Conservative Party is today. So I want to start on the economy. Yes, there are challenges around affordability. We have heard comments in this House. I've had conversations with my own constituents.
Your guys' fault.
I'm sure it might be the same for you in West Nova. But I think it's important to examine the question that this is a global phenomenon.
Nope, you fucked the pooch on this one, buddy.
Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, the other day, stand up in this House and suggest that Canada is the only country that is dealing with affordability challenges, that the government alone...
That's the same logic as all your friends jump off a bridge, so you're going to jump off too?
So I'll remind her that we went through a global pandemic, and I would invite her to read any newspaper around the world, and you'll see a lot of the same headlines. Challenges around housing.
So it's not their fault then. The whole world's suffering, so it's not their fault.
Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, I'll remind Canadians at home, we've gone through a difficult period. This government has been here to support Canadians along the way. Interest rates are back down within the target range of 2%. And the hope is that we can see further Bank of Canada interest rate cuts, overnight lending. And so I think it's important when the Conservative Party stands up to try to keep some element of credibility about when they talk about these issues, the level of nuance that exists. I do want to highlight a few statistics for people at home. We have had the second best cumulative economic growth in the G7 since 2015. So when the Conservatives get up and suggest that the country is broken, that nothing good has happened, they should be a little bit more poignant in their attack about where the government can do better, but also recognize that there has been success. That's the second best economic growth in the G7, Mr. Speaker. Many people at home may not know that because if they listen just solely to what they may hear from the opposition benches, I don't think it's reflective of where we're at. We have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. Of course, that's a amount of debt as a proportion and size of the economy, which has been a really important target for the government to maintain. We have a AAA credit rating. We're one of the only advanced countries, advanced economies and countries in the world that have a AAA credit rating, and we've seen the highest wage growth in the G7 since 2019. Now, I've said this before, Madam Speaker. I know that that does not mean that every Canadian who's sitting at home right now is feeling necessarily good about their circumstances. There are challenges. But it's important when we're in this place, if we're going to show a level of balance and reasonableness, that we have to be able to highlight some of the successes the country has had and areas where every parliamentarian, regardless of where we sit in this place, wants to continue to push government. That is our job as parliamentarians, is to continue to push better for Canadians. I also want to highlight the fact that, you hear often from the opposition benches, again, nothing good happening in the country, but they never talk about the fact that we had the third highest amount of foreign direct investment in the world, not on a per capita basis, just in the world in 2023. Those are really important numbers. Now, look, we do have productivity challenges. This has been over multiple governments for the last number of decades. The government has recognized that, and I do think that they need to continue to be stringent and focused in that question about what we can do to increase innovation, productivity in this country. I think we need to be focused on reducing regulatory barriers and red tape. We have a massive natural resource
sound like Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Speaker. We have to make sure that we're balancing, of course, environmental outcomes, Indigenous participation.
No. We buy our oil from Saudi.
These issues.
Come on.
At the same time, we need to build big projects that get things done in this country. I think the government has made some strides in this area, but I would humbly suggest we need to do more. But
sounds like he's a closeted conservative.
Economic realities, I would suggest that this government has had a pretty strong success story. And when I compare it to a slogan factory on the other side, Mr. Speaker, I'm not hearing a credible plan of what the Conservatives would actually do. When you write 3 or 4 slogans on the back of a napkin, that does not represent responsible public policy of what the opposition would do differently. Let's talk Canada-U.S. relations, Mr. Speaker. It is extremely important as Mr. Trump retakes the Oval Office in January, and his inauguration comes up. This does pose challenges for Canada, and other Western liberal democracies. The president-elect has talked about the idea of imposing a 25% tariff on all products from Mexico and Canada. And not only do I think that that would be bad economic policy for the United States, of course it would have impacts on the Canadian economy, but we do have to examine who's the best to lead that relationship. And, you know, the Prime Minister has had an existing relationship with Donald Trump. This government was there during the renegotiation of CUSMA to make sure that we worked alongside our American partners and Mexican authorities, but at the same time we protected Canadian interests. I think the government did extraordinarily well in the 42nd Parliament in that period. The Prime Minister is the first G7 leader to actually sit down with Donald Trump following his election victory, with where he went last week down to Florida. I want to compare that to what I've seen here in the House of Commons. I saw the leader of the official opposition stand up and say things like, Canada first, we got to make Canada first. I don't know what the heck that means, Mr. Speaker, but it sounds isolationist. And for a country that exports so many products around the world, whether agriculture, forestry, critical minerals, energy, the idea of Canada looking inward, because that's kind of the play, and they haven't really articulated what the heck that means, I don't think that's good for Canada. He stands up and suggests, okay, now we have to kill carbon pricing because Donald Trump's in. No, like that's not a responsible element. When I look at what the NDP leader has said, he suggested striking some type of war cabinet. No, lighting our hair on fire is not the way to go here. We need to have a level of statesmanship.
Man, this guy sounds like a total dumbass.
I have not agreed with everything the Prime Minister has done. We've had some...
He's shitting on Canada first. This guy's an actual traitor.
...statesman than the other two leaders of the official parties, major parties here in the House. Look, on foreign affairs, I think it is outrageous, Mr. Speaker, that the leader of the official opposition has not committed the Conservative Party to a 2% defence target. The Conservatives love to beat their chest about the work that they would do for the Canadian military, yet they fail to remind Canadians that when they left office, defence spending was actually below 1%. Now, this government, I think, has taken a little bit too long to get there, but we have gotten there on the 2% commitment by 2030.
How is he criticizing Pierre for not committing to 2% when Trudeau prides himself on not hitting 2%?
Over the next number of years. I find it extremely irresponsible for a government in waiting.
Dude, this guy's a fucking idiot.
When will they formally commit to the 2% GDP target on defence? They owe that answer to Canadians, and they owe it sooner rather than later, particularly in the environment that we're in.
He's actually mental.
Mr. Speaker, let's just think about this for a moment. The member from Timmins just earlier in his question referenced the fact that there are allegations being made that agents of the Indian government were involved in the Conservative leadership campaign, particularly to actually dispel and to hurt Patrick Bown, who was running against the member from Carleton. The member from Carleton is the only leader of all the major parties to not actually get his security clearance. Why would he not do this? This man wants to be the Prime Minister of the country, Mr. Speaker, and he refuses to go through the security clearance process to be adequately advised and informed by national security advisors about what is happening on foreign interference. That is not responsible leadership, Mr. Speaker. So if I'm presented with a question here about do I have confidence in the government and the Prime Minister, do I agree with everything that's happened? No. But when I compare what the alternative would be, how in good faith could I vote for this ever?
Somebody who wants to put Canada first?
Hasn't even gone through the vetting process. He wants to be the Prime Minister. Last piece I want to talk about is on affordability and social programs. I know I have about 60 seconds left, Mr. Speaker. Look, whether it's on dental, whether it's on pharmacare, whether it's on school food and school programs that really matter in our neck of the woods in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, on seniors, they voted against increases for OAS. They moved the eligible age for seniors benefits from 65 to 67. They voted against increases to the guaranteed income supplement. And on housing, they are actually taking away the money that we are doing to try to build more housing. We had the most amount of houses built in Nova Scotia in 2023, Mr. Speaker. We have to clean up that issue, but it is well on its way. And the Conservatives want to take away the funding that actually builds the homes that we need to put Canadians in. So I see I'm at the end of my time, Mr. Speaker. For all those reasons, and if I had even more time, that's why I will not be voting in favor of this motion, and I look forward to my questions from my honourable colleagues.
Questions and comments, question commentaire. And I'm just going to remind everyone to let's go quickly so everybody can get to participate in here. The honourable member Calgary Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I did take my colleague up on his challenge there about looking at Canada's growth rate versus the other G7 countries. And I noticed that since 2015, when his government came in, This country's performance is less than half the cumulative GDP growth that the United States has accomplished. And that is the main metric we have to look at here, not underperforming European countries, quite frankly, which have gone through a major problem with energy provision, particularly since the war. However, we have to take a look at where we are in this mix. So if you can explain why we've underperformed the U.S. consistently since his government has been in power, if not the carbon tax is the equation, then tell us what the problem is.
The honourable member for Kings Hands.
Mr. Speaker, I said we were second in overall cumulative economic growth, and of course we were second to the Americans. Look, find me an economy in the last, an advanced economy in a Western liberal democracy that has been able to keep pace with the United States. There is none. I do agree, and I said in my speech around the productivity question, it's an important one. I think the member opposite and I would share that common concern that we need to bring forward initiatives, and we need to continue to push the Privy Council and the Cabinet on more measures that can be done. And I think actually this relationship with the Trump administration coming in gives an opportunity for all of us as parliamentarians to look at ways that we can harmonize policy between Canada and U.S. and focus on that question of competitiveness.
Questions and comments?
He's saying Canada First is absurd. Are you mentally ill?
I want to follow up on whether or not the member who lives in Stornoway is refusing or he can't get a security clearance. And my expert on this would be the member for Wellington Halton Hills, widely respected in the House, who told the Globe and Mail on October 23rd that their concern and the Conservatives was security clearances involve a rigorous process that includes background checks on family members, credit and criminal checks, and intrusive questions about one's sexual partners or whether they have used drugs. And that the Conservatives fear that any personal and family information obtained through this would be used for politically motivated purposes against the member for Stornoway. I'd just like to ask a simple question. What the heck is in the Poilievre family closet that they're so worried about?
Nothing.
Just using the name of a member. The honourable member for Kings Hands.
Look, the member from Timmins raises some really important questions that, frankly, I'm not in the ability to answer.
He just called him an idiot like 2 minutes ago.
I repeat what I said in my speech. You want to become the Prime Minister of this country, you have to go through the security vetting process to get national security clearance. So why the member is choosing not to do that, whether or not there's skeletons in his closet, whether or not he hasn't really given us a good answer. And he talks about Stornoway. The member from Timmins talked about the member from Stornoway. I do want to put on the record, I think it is quite the audacity for the member from Carleton to call out the leader of the NDP about why he sits in this place and why he serves when the member from Carleton has the biggest pension in this place, maybe the biggest fat cat, and has not worked a day outside of this place. I think that is absolutely ridiculous.
Biggest wang, too.
The role that we should be serving as members of Parliament.
Questions and comments. Yellow member for Kitchener Centre. Who's tried?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spent a lot of my time in this place advocating for this government to do things they've promised to do and most of the time haven't yet, be it the $4.5 billion Canada mental health transfer, ending subsidies to the oil and gas industry, or a fully funded Canada disability benefit that would lift people with disabilities out of poverty. So one way for me to look at this confidence vote, if I'm to trust the polls, is this. Is it better for my community if I focus my efforts on pushing this government to do the things they said they were going to do, or a potential future Conservative government that not only hasn't promised these things at all, but on climate, for example, is more than likely to backslide on them? What are the comments from the member for Kings Hands on this?
The honourable member for Kings Hands.
Mr. Speaker, I would say that although the honourable member and I may share some slightly different views of how the world, I like and appreciate the way that he comes to this place in a respectful debate. I would say, although that he may not be satisfied with everything that has happened on this government, I suspect that there's many things that he can agree upon and that he should continue to push this government and work with a government that is moderate, that is progressive, that will continue to drive the same values. And
Bro, shut up with your progressive shit.
That is the farthest thing he'd like to see.
It's their entire identity, isn't it?
I hope the honourable member makes his airplane. Resuming debate. L'honorable député de Jean.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like I'm in family here because I've got my colleagues here from the same region as me, so it's great. Michelle, you're great. This opposition motion, this confidence motion, well, what I would say, Mr. Speaker, is that our line of conduct has been very clear from the outset. You might remember September 25th, the leader of the Bloc Québécois gave the government an ultimatum, and our objective was to protect seniors and our farmers. And, we gave the government the benefit of the doubt. We hoped that it would reach an agreement with us to ensure that the minority government would stay in place. And for both for C-319 regarding pensions and C-282 with regard to supply management, the government decided to turn a deaf ear, and instead it proposed measures that have really backfired on them, because I heard from seniors in terms of how much more cynical they are about politics now. I've never heard so much talk about this since 2019 when I was elected. Same thing regarding the GST, where my constituents said, this is crazy because it really backfired for the retailers who have to put it in place. So, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that for the Bloc then, we will topple the government if we have the chance. So I think it won't be news to you to learn that the government will be voting for this motion. Why? Because I sincerely believe that we cannot trust the government. But that being said, Mr. Speaker, I'm teasing, obviously, but there's a very interesting question as to, can we trust the government? But here's another question. Can we trust the leader of the official opposition? And I said, and I think, why don't we give the leader of the official opposition, a taste of his own medicine, to get back at him for what he did to the NDP. So it's kind of a speech analysis that we're doing with this opposition motion. The Conservative Party takes some statements that the NDP leader has made to show him that if he wants to be consistent, then he should topple the government. And the Conservatives are right. If the NDP wants to be consistent with its statements, then it should topple the government.
But there's another question worth asking. Can we have confidence in the leader of the official opposition if we look into his speeches and his statements? So that's what I tried to do, Mr. Speaker. I have a lot of quotes. I'm sure the Conservatives will like hearing them because this is material coming entirely from the Conservative leader. The first topic I will get into is the famous references to being woke. Here are some examples of what the Conservatives have said. The Conservative leader, rather. November 26th, last week, when we were doing the emergency debate on American tariffs. Here's what the member for Carleton, the leader of the official opposition, said, and I quote, "Their woke agenda divides us and distracts us from our work. Young men and young women want nothing of this government's woke agenda. They want to fight for our country. They want to be proud of the Canadian flag. We will get rid of the woke agenda. ...
Did he really say ...
We'll have a warrior culture."
So the Bloc makes it official that they're voting in favor of non-confidence. So we're seeing something transpire that we have yet to actually see ever.
What he means by a warrior culture instead of a woke culture. Here's another quote from the opposition leader from the day before, November 25th. "Mr. Speaker, the hateful mob that we witnessed in the streets of Montreal is the consequence of 9 years under this woke prime minister who speaks of radical woke identity politics, who divides people based on their race, their gender, their vaccine status," because we know the Conservative leader has a soft spot for conspiracy theories about vaccines, vaccine status, religion, and more besides. That's another quote about the dangers that await Canadian society due to woke culture. Here's another quote. "We will bring back freedom." This came from last year. "I know that freedom is a fundamental principle of our country. The Liberal government wants to censor the internet. The CRTC, a woke agency, wants to impose its values on Quebecers." Let me sum all this up. Oh, but first, let's go later into that quote. He goes on to say the Minister of Canadian Heritage and other woke bureaucrats here in Ottawa want to control what Quebecers can see and say online. So now I'll sum it all up. When the leader of the official opposition talks about radical identity politics, when he talks about policies that divide people based on their race and their religion, when he talks about policies aimed at imposing values upon Quebec, well, here's the question. Who's doing all this in Quebec? Who's acting woke when it comes to Quebec? Well, in Quebec, people who are woke tend to be against Bill 21. Bill 21 would make it so in Quebecois public spaces, religious expression is limited. So in Quebec, we consider people who are against Bill 21 as woke. They seek to impose a minority vision on the Quebecois majority. So there's a good Quebecois definition of what woke politics is. Now, let's look into what the leader of the official opposition has said about Bill 21. The leader of the official opposition has said at a number of times, quote, "I am against Bill 21. Seriously. If I were member of the National Assembly, I would vote against it. And if someone were to introduce such a bill at the federal level, which I do not anticipate, I would vote against it. I believe in freedom of religion." So that's what the official opposition leader has to say. So one reason why the leader of the official opposition wants to bring down the government is because he's just too woke. Here in Ottawa, he's against woke culture, but when he goes to Quebec, he is part of woke culture. If you look through a Quebec lens, the leader of the official opposition is a real SJW. So that's something worth noting. If any Quebecer wants to understand what the Conservatives are all about, I think they'll be a little baffled by what we hear day after day. At any rate, the leader of the official opposition might want to explain.
This guy's pretty boring.
What's the difference between woke in Canada and woke in Quebec? Is this a woke version of the two solitudes? Perhaps. But at any rate, what we can see is that the values of the official opposition leader do not align with Quebec values. Another important theme for the official opposition leader is inflation and its impacts. At a number of different points, we've heard about all of the negative impacts of inflation from the opposition leader. And he talks about how broken Canadian society is. He always says, Canada is broken. We got to fix the budget because Canada is broken and you can fix it by fixing the budget. And to illustrate this, he put out an ad full of falsehoods. In this ad, we saw a Quebecois family stating that they couldn't pay their mortgage. And then later we learned that this was all falsehoods. It was stock footage, and the family in question was very much able to pay their mortgage. They felt that they had been made fools of because they had been used by the Conservative leader to promote his own fantasies. So there's one example. And then there was another video by the opposition leader about the Canada he dreams of. the member for Lac, it had some music, and the member for Lac Saint Jean was going to sing along, but then he realized that it was the leader of the official opposition making a bunch of false statements. What struck me the most was the use made by the official opposition leader of medical assistance in dying. So for the opposition leader, there is a connection between medical assistance in dying and inflation, recessions, financial difficulties. Here's what he said on June 7th, 2023. And again, this is the leader of the official opposition. People who show up at the Mississauga Food Bank and who are seeking medical assistance in dying, not because they are sick, but because they are hungry, have apparently never had it so good. So that's what the official opposition leader has said. He says that there are people out there in Mississauga who show up at a food bank and they're so hungry, just so hungry that they are asking for medical assistance in dying. May 15th, 2023. One in every 5 Canadians is skipping meals because of the carbon tax increase. And there's another link he's making. He's making a link between the carbon tax and the medical assistance in dying. He says 1.5 million people have come to food banks, and some, he said again, are asking for medical assistance in dying because they are not able to feed themselves, heat their homes, or keep a roof over their heads. I have yet to meet someone who has asked for medical assistance in dying because they were hungry. Perhaps one day, the leader of the official opposition will introduce us to someone in this situation. He also mentioned that he likes to be poetic when he gives speeches, so maybe this is part of his poetry. I can appreciate poetry, but I do not follow the poetry by the Conservative leader. And after he talks about medical assistance in dying, he also talks about scurvy. Here's a quote from February 2024. We are witnessing the reappearance of diseases that had been eradicated long ago, like scurvy, because people are unable to feed themselves nutritious meals under the impoverishing politics of this prime minister. So we've got people who are seeking medical assistance in dying because they don't have enough to eat. And then there's other people apparently who have scurvy because they're not eating. Wow. If that's not a broken Canada, I don't know what is. Really think that we are at a watershed moment. Things are falling apart left, right, and center. And, you know, I've always said that the official opposition leader doesn't offer enough solutions, but he does offer some solutions. So here's his solution for inflation. I found it. I've looked in the parliamentary record. I looked long and hard, and I have found quotes showing that the official opposition leader has the solution. Here's one of his solutions for inflation. Quote, Canadians can escape the effects of inflation by using cryptocurrency. Ooh, that's quite the segue there from the official opposition leader. He says that the control over money should be removed from bankers and politicians and be given to the people. So that's something he believes in. And again, he also says we will give people freedom. Freedom, he loves that word, to choose their own currency without the Bank of Canada intervening to print money and devalue Canadian currency. So finally, we get the solution to inflation from the official opposition leader. This is what's going to prevent people from seeking out medical assistance and dying and suffering from scurvy. That's the solution. Bitcoin.
Holy smokes, man. I'll be honest, folks. I'll be honest. I can't fucking do it. I can't do it. That's it. I'm tapped out. I can't. This is mental. I'm getting dumber by the minute here, and I can't afford to get any dumber. This is horrible. We're just gonna cut the arm off to save the body. You know what I'm saying? That's it. We're gonna end it here. My ass is going numb from sitting for so long. We're gonna end it here, dude. We're gonna end it here. That's brutal. Oh my goodness. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you guys on Monday for the the vote of non-confidence. I'm not going to stream tomorrow unless some crazy stuff happens. But yeah, I'm going to do you all a favor. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go spend time with your family and your friends. Go have a beer. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, guys. See you on Monday back on this channel. Peace and love. Bye.